It all started because I had to go to the bathroom. I was on my way home after having worked a double, and if I had just gone before I left work, it wouldn't have been a problem. I was in such a hurry to get home because I knew I was going to have to go back and do it again in 8 hours. My relief had called out about 30 minutes before my shift ended, and though the manager was sympathetic, he said I had to stay unless I could find someone to work for me. 8 hours later, I staggered out the front door and into my car so I could go home and pass out in time to do it again tomorrow. I was about halfway home when I was struck with the overwhelming urge to use the bathroom. It wasn't one of those you can hold it kind of warnings. It was a you are going to pee in the toilet or pee in your pants, but you only have about 2 minutes or so to pull the trigger on that decision kind of warnings. I was about 20 minutes from home, and every place I passed on the way was dark and locked up for the night. I had just about decided to pull over to the side of the road when I saw the comfortable glow of a Dollar General sign in the distance. I pulled in, figuring if it was actually open I'd use their bathroom, and if not I'd just go behind the building. It was about 10:30 at night, and I was surprised when I saw that the open sign was lit up. The sign was a little different too, not the usual Dollar General logo, and as I got closer, I saw that I had pulled into a Dollar General beyond. It wasn't a type of Dollar General I was familiar with, but beggars could hardly be choosers. I heard the comfortable ding of the automatic door as I walked inside, and it put me at ease. The personal speakers that some manager had rigged into the sound system were playing soft rock from one of the local stations, and the overhead fluorescents flickered and crackled in a way that makes you think they were just about to go out. The doors closed behind me with an almost ominous thump, but I shook it off as my bladder throbbed again. I found a tired-looking blonde woman standing behind the counter, and she seemed barely coherent. She didn't even look at me when I walked in, and when I asked for the bathroom key, she turned her head minutely and offered me a fluorescent pink fly swatter with a key hooked to the bottom. I nearly ran to the bathroom, slipping the key in as I opened the door and paused in confusion. I opened the door to find another Dollar General. It was the same as when I went in. The same stagnant soft rock played over the speakers. The same fluorescent buzzed overhead. The same tired salt and pepper fake linoleum scuffed underfoot. I was a little mesmerized as I stepped inside, the feeling of vertigo momentary but awful as I let the door snap shut behind me. My need to pee was forgotten as I looked around, and I would be too distracted to remember it for a while. There were only 2 differences between this Dollar General and the one I had stepped out of. One was the disappearance of the blonde woman. I had thought maybe I had just gotten turned around somehow. Just a tired trick of the mind until I walked up to the counter. The woman was gone. But it wasn't something that seemed odd right away. She had probably gone into the office to count the drawers so she could go home, and I rang the bell on the desk as I called for help. I rang it a dozen or so times, calling loudly for someone, but no one ever came out. I jumped the counter then, but the office behind it was empty. I checked the back, checked every aisle, but they were empty too. The second difference was that all the doors out of the store were locked and refused to budge. It was getting too weird by now, and I really wished I had just peed behind the store. I went to the doors and pushed on them, looking for a lock or something, but there was nothing on the smooth surface. There was no mechanism to unlock the door, either. The door was simply unmoving. I went into the back, meaning to go out the back door, but that door was also locked. After about 30 minutes of looking for a key or some way out, I sat down on the counter and decided that maybe I had been locked in for the night. The blonde had looked half brain dead and had probably just left suddenly and locked me in. If she had, then why leave the lights and the music on? I pondered it for a few minutes, but eventually, I just shrugged and decided to call the police so they could come get me. I didn't want one of the cops to drive by on a routine patrol and think I was stealing. What's more, I had to be back at work before Dollar General opened up. My boss was not going to be happy if I was late, and was unlikely to believe I was trapped in a Dollar General, so I took out my cell phone. But when I dialed 911, all I got was weird static. I dialed a few more numbers, but each time I did, the static got louder and angrier, and eventually, I stopped trying. The 5G, however, still worked, so I guess that's lucky for you guys. I decided that if I couldn't reach them, I would at least tell them what was going on. I opted to make a sign so that if someone saw me, they wouldn't think I was here robbing the place. So I set about looking for something to make a sign with, and luckily for me, it was a Dollar General. About 2 minutes later, I had a sign made out of construction paper taped to the door, letting them know that I was stuck in here and needed help. After that, I stepped away from the door and tried to decide what to do now. My bladder groaned again, and I remembered why I had stopped here in the first place. I opened the door to the bathroom and hey, wouldn't you know it, but there was another Dollar General in there. I must have opened the bathroom door and stepped through about 4 times before I just decided to go in the water fountain. My business completed, I decided to have a bite. I walked around, finding some cold sandwiches and chips, a soda, and a little ice cream, and took it to the front. The self-checkout wouldn't work, so in the end, I just left some money on the counter and figured I'd pay the difference when they opened tomorrow. As I sat eating, the food balanced in my lap as the law chair I'd found allowed me to eat off something other than the floor. I found myself feeling oddly uncomfortable. This wasn't the kind of place you were supposed to eat in. It was tantamount to camping in a car wash, and it felt like something was watching me as I munched my food. I had set up near the door, and as I found my eyes straying back to it again and again, I noticed something else strange. I was next to a pretty busy road, and approaching midnight or not, I should have seen headlights of some kind by now. We were right beside a pretty busy highway, and the idea that not so much as a log truck of a delivery vehicle had cruised by all night was very strange. It was then that I noticed, after looking back at the door for about the 10th time in 2 minutes, that my sign was gone. I left my food in the chair, thinking maybe it had fallen down, but it was nowhere to be found either. The tape I had used to stick it up there, the markers I had left on the counter, even the package of poster board was gone. I walked around saying hello again, thinking someone had come and found my mess before cleaning it up, but I was still alone in the store. I made a new sign and hung it up in the window, and as I returned to my slightly melted ice cream, I kept looking back at it. I looked at it mistrustfully, waiting for it to disappear again, but it stayed stuck to the door just as the last one had, until it had suddenly gone missing. That was, after finishing my little dinner. I grabbed some bedding from an end tap near the middle of the store and some chair pads from the same area. I figured I wouldn't get more than a few hours before someone came in and asked what the hell I thought I was doing, and settled in to get some sleep. I tried to send a text to my boss to let him know what was going on, but the text just sat there unsent. I sighed and closed my eyes, getting comfy as I tried to fall asleep. I nodded off eventually and woke up 10 hours later to much the same scene. I was a little concerned when I looked at my phone and saw what time it was, but I was even more concerned when I realized the sun still wasn't up. No one had tried to call me, and no one had arrived to ask me what the hell I was doing. And that was when I sat down to write this. As I said, the 5G seems to work very well, but I can't so much as make a phone call from my phone. The outlets seem to work as well, and there are plenty of chargers here to keep my phone from dying. I don't seem to be in any danger of starving either. I have food, water, and power, but no way out. I don't know how long I can stay here or wherever I am, but it appears I have found something incredible and inescapable. It's funny. My friends and I used to joke about the number of Dollar Generals in any given place. They always seemed to get closer and closer to each other, and I once made a joke about how one day I'd turn down an aisle and find myself in a completely different Dollar General. Enter the back area, a new Dollar General location. Fall through a hole in the floor. You'd drop right into a newly constructed Dollar General. We'd laugh about it over our beers, but it seems a lot less funny now. I'll keep you all posted. I suppose this would count as my first day in Dollar General Beyond, and I'll let you know if I discover anything new, if you come across one. I cannot stress enough to avoid Dollar General Beyond at all costs. If you do, for God's sake, don't enter the bathroom. There are forces at work that I don't think anyone understands. Hey everyone, I have no idea how long I've been in the Dollar General Beyond, but I figure it's been about a week. I've been keeping notes in my journal. It's the purple one with the glitter cover, if you must know, so I could update you guys on what I've learned about this place. It isn't a lot. I'm still getting used to the jab, but I have made a few little discoveries. First, let me answer a few of your more burning questions. Yes, all my social media works, but most of my friends seem to think I'm just having a go at them. The ones who do call the police for me message me back and tell me to stop messing around. I've had my account seized on Facebook because they think I've been hacked, but Reddit still seems to work pretty well. Some of you have brought up the bathroom situation. I can pee down the sink in the back. But for number twos, I've set up a bucket with a bag in it. I've been putting the bags in the manager's office and just kinda don't go in there. The doors do not open and the glass will not break, as I will explain later. Keep them coming though, guys, and I'll answer some more on the next one. My first discovery was that the things inside the jab are finite. Jab is what I started calling the place to save time, because spelling out Dollar General Beyond got old pretty quickly. The stuff that's here doesn't seem to spoil. At least none of the packages have dates on them, but they do run out. You'd think it would take you a while to go through all the stuff in the store, but you'd be wrong. 7 sleeps, since there are no days here. After I got stuck here, I was out of the sandwiches I liked. The coffee drinks I usually drink were starting to get a little low, and the ice cream was gone. I may have been doing a little stress eating, but most of it is the unnoticed replenishment that we all take for granted. I tried to find more in the back, but the back is just a big open space. There are some hand trucks back there and a couple of those pump-up lift things, but no product to put on the shelf. This leads me to the second thing. There is no way out of the jab. The doors are still locked and I can't see anything out of the windows. There may be things out there, but they seem content to ignore me or are unaware that I'm here. The doors in the back are also unmoving, and I looked for something big to break the front windows with, but that only solidified rule number 2. I found a lug wrench in the automotive section, but it simply bounces off the glass and doors. It doesn't seem to damage them. Nothing beyond little dents. And I finally just gave up when I got tired. While I was laying on the floor, my chest working like an accordion, I noticed the ceiling. I scampered to the back and found a ladder near the wall that they probably used for changing out the ceiling tiles and took it to the floor so I could climb into the ceiling. I thought that if I could make a hole in the roof, it's just a green metal roof, I could get out and see where I was. I took some cutting implements and got the biggest ladder I could find in the back. But as I slid one of the ceiling tiles aside, I saw not an attic space but a giant pulsating void. I reached a hand out to it, but I couldn't bring myself to touch it. It was as if something was repelling me. And after standing up there for a few minutes or hours or however long I was on that ladder, I climbed down. I try not to think about it if I can help it. I've started doing things in the store to keep my mind busy, and they've sort of colored my days. If day 1 was figuring things out and day 2 was getting settled, then day 3 was when I sat down to color. I had meant to go get some mouthwash when I saw the rack of color books on the stationery aisle. There were all kinds of coloring books. Avengers and princesses, dinosaurs and sea creatures. And before I knew it, I had a pack of colored pencils opened and was filling the pages. I spent most of that day coloring in animals of various kinds or superheroes or the intricate designs in the adult coloring books. Heck, I colored in some of the regular books too, and I grabbed a couple of the more interesting ones to read off the spindle rack at the end of the aisle. On day 4, I set about building as many of the Lego sets that were on the toy aisle as I could. You wouldn't imagine that a Dollar General would have a lot of them, but I spent the better part of 12 hours putting Legos together. Spaceships, dinosaurs, buildings, vehicles. I assembled them all and began flying or driving them around the floor half-heartedly. By the end of the day, I was just throwing them at the front door and watching them smash to pieces. I told myself it was to make it harder for anything coming in, but I really just liked the way they went to pieces when they hit the glass. Day 5 was spent cooking and making crafts. I used the gas stoves they sell to cook a few dishes from the cookbooks, and I even ate a few of them. I had found a cookbook on the shelf and had the ingredients for most of the dishes, so I figured why not give it a try. After that, I built a bunch of the crafts on the craft aisle, inflated some of the inflatable pool toys and had a tea party with them, and really just kinda had fun. This was honestly a time of relaxation for me more than anything. I had worked myself to the bone for years, and the ability to just kind of exist was nice for a change. I had been sent home for about 2 months with pay during COVID, and the longer I stayed here, the more I realized I missed it. I missed getting paid to exist, doing things I liked, and just having fun. It wasn't actual fun though, I guess. It was more like when you're a kid at daycare and waiting for your mom to pick you up while you play with their toys. It all came to a head on the 6th day. I woke up, excited to find something else to do, but the longer I looked, the less I found to do. I put on some clothes from the clothing section, but I couldn't find anything that was my size. I found some pants that were too big and a shirt that was too small, and threw them both on the floor as I just decided to keep my old clothes from yesterday. I went to the toy aisle, but nothing caught my eye, and after stepping on a Lego truck with my bare foot, I went to find some shoes. I then went to make some breakfast, but I was kind of over it. I settled for grilled cheese before going to find something to occupy myself. Most of the crafts were built. Most of the books were colored or read, and I was struggling to find something to keep my mind occupied. I found one of those old plug-in games, the kind you plug into a TV and play games on. But I couldn't find a TV to attach the cords to. I went to bed that night feeling frustrated and realized some of the magic was gone from my sanctuary-turned-prison cell. Then on day 7 okay, this sounds a little childish, but I got fed up and went around wrecking things. It started with something small. I woke up with a pain in my neck, surrounded by inflatable toys, and went to go get a coffee drink. I stank. I could smell myself after not having showered in 5 days, and decided I might try to set up a camp shower. I was still hoping to wake up and discover that this was some kind of dream I was having, but the longer it went on, the less sure I was. So I went to get the coffee drink, a Starbucks mocha frap, from the cooler, but they were out. I didn't remember drinking the last one, but I guess I must have. There was a whole row of French vanilla beside it, but suddenly that made me even angrier. I didn't want French vanilla. I didn't want microwave toasters cooked in the microwave I'd found in the break room. And I didn't want to be stuck in a Dollar General with no one to talk to anymore. I took one of the French vanilla drinks, stepped back, and hurled it through the glass front of the refrigerator. It shattered, spilling glass and coffee all over the floor, and made another discovery right then. Number 3. That felt really good. I did again, and again, and again when I ran out of glass. I threw a few at the front door, but it didn't break. After that, I went on a rampage through the aisles. I smashed all my crafts, threw all my Legos, popped my inflatable friends with scissors or knives or just by jumping on them, tossed soda bottles, watched the tops burst as they went flying, and basically had a tantrum that would befit any child under 6. When I was done, I lay in the wreckage, making snow angels in a pile of chips I had poured out, and as I panted heavily, I felt a little better. I had pushed over a few of the shelves as well, and between 2 of them, the slant they made seeming to form an arrow, I saw something else I had done. In my chaos, something had hit one of the ceiling tiles, and now all that blackness could be seen. I started to worry about that, but it was burnt away in the face of my newfound adrenaline. I climbed onto the 2 shelves, shifting a little as they groaned mutinously, and looked into that void. It was still just hanging up there, motionless overhead, and I grabbed something from the top of the fallen shelf and tossed it towards the space. I didn't write down what it was, but I guess it doesn't matter because it never came out of that space again. I grabbed something else, had reared back to fling again, but I stopped halfway through my throw. Something about that darkness made me very uneasy. The way it moved after I had tossed something into it made it seem angry. I know how that sounds. How can darkness seem angry? But it did. It seemed to watch me as I prepared to throw, daring me to let it fly and see what happened. I let whatever it was fall to the ground and went down to get ready for bed. I was tired, exhausted from my day of destroying my prison, and I decided to drag my bedding under the shelves I had dropped together. 1. It made it feel like I had shelter. And 2, it was the cleanest part of the floor with the least crap on it. 3, I guess, was that if it all collapsed on top of me, at least I wouldn't be stuck here. I had scratched that last part out of my journal, but I think it's important to have it now. It speaks a lot to my state of mind. I must have dozed off for a little bit because when I came awake I was surprised to see that something had changed. The store was completely dark. The store lights had never gone off in the week that I had been here, not unless they went off after I went to sleep, and the new dark was highly unsettling. I wondered if that was what had woken me up, but as the shelves groaned again, I realized it had been something else. Whatever that something else was, it was now perched on top of my makeshift structure. For the first time in a week, I had something else here with me, and the knowledge made my blood run cold. I was under a big pile of blankets and inflatables that I had dragged here, and I snuggled down beneath them like a kid when he thinks there's a monster in his closet. I heard it moving around, heard it making its careful way off the shelves and across the mess I had created. The way it moved made me believe it was huge and hunkered to fit in the space. but I refused to peek and see what it was. It made noises of discomfort more than once, clearly coming down on some of the sharper bits of my mess, and I closed my eyes and tried to stay as quiet as I could. I wasn't sure if it was dangerous, and I didn't know if it would hurt me, but I knew enough to know that I didn't want to find out. It moved about for some indeterminable amount of time. Could be an hour as much as it could be 5 minutes, but eventually, it left and I could see the lights blink back to life as they came on again. Whatever it had been, it had killed the lights, and I made a note to watch out for that in the future. Eventually, I gave up on sleep and got up to see what was still eatable in the destroyed ruins of my cell. After finding some unopened chips, a mostly intact pizza, and some soda that I hadn't wrecked, I sat down to eat breakfast and write this. I decided to transcribe the journal into my phone, just in case something happens to it. And I've also decided to go into the bathroom again. It brought me here the first time. Maybe it can take me back again. Even if it doesn't, maybe it will take me somewhere else. I've ruined all my food here during my tantrum, and if it brings me right back here, then I guess I'll have to salvage what's left and try to live as long as I can. Looking through the door now. The Jeb on the other side looks very different than the one I'm in. It looks like this one when I first came through, and I'm hoping that if it doesn't take me back where I came from then, maybe it will take me somewhere that less wrecked. Wish me luck. Either way, that's all for now. Hopefully, there will be a chance for more some other time. Hey there everyone. It's me again. It's been about I don't know how long since my last update, and I've made some new discoveries since. So, when I went through the door, I had a backpack, my journal, and a charger with a butt. I was wearing a fresh pair of basketball shorts, some flip-flops, and a shirt for some sports team or another. I had also stuck a few undestroyed bits of food in the backpack, and as I passed within the room I closed my eyes and prayed I would come out in my world. No such luck. But I did step out into a brand new Dollar General beyond. The shelves were upright. The floor may not have gleamed, but it was clean, and the shelves and coolers were stocked for another day of business. Stranger still was the change that came over me. When I walked through, I had been holding the straps of my backpack, praying under my breath for escape. But as I walked in, my hands suddenly grabbed nothing, and I felt jeans on my legs and boots on my feet again. I looked down to find my work shirt, the logo for Rocco Subs across the front, and took inventory of myself before going on. Discovery 4, you can't take things with you from other Dollar Generals. Only the things I brought into the Dollar General Beyond stayed with me when I traveled. Traveling is what I have called it when I go into the bathroom and step into a new Dollar General Beyond. My phone, my wallet, my work ID, the 27 cents I had from something earlier that day, and the granola I had crumpled up in my back pocket travel with me. Anything I try to bring through from other DGBs does not come with me. It's not a big problem. I can get more chargers or supplies when I get there. But it's a little jarring to feel the backpack disappear off your back. As such, I have started keeping my journal here on my phone since the words and notes seem to come along with me too. This brings us to the next thing. Discovery 5, the stores reset themselves when you travel. The Jag I walked into looked similar to the one I had left, and the stock was back and in place. I say similar because the inflatables are gone in favor of autumn items. There's decorative pumpkins on the seasonal shelves. There are fall items throughout the store, and many of the coffee drinks now have pumpkin spice in their midst. Everything else is the same, but it's like the store goes through little changes when you go to a new one. I still couldn't leave. The doors refuse to open. But the lights are on and the music is still playing, so that's not too bad. Plus, I like pumpkin spice, so that's not a big problem. This time around I started experimenting a bit with the door. I now realized that the sign I had made on the first night hadn't just gone away. When I passed back through the bathroom door, I had gone into a new dab and the sign hadn't existed there yet. I didn't bother to put one up this time, not really wanting to attract the attention of whatever might be out there anyway. I took note of my food, deciding how much I'd have before I had to move again, and figured I had about 2 months of food on hand as long as I didn't go buck wild. I found some bedding and made myself a little bed area, and then I set to experimenting. I started by throwing things through the door. It started with action figures. I probably tossed about 24 army men through the door before realizing I had no way to see if I could get them back. So I went to the dental aisle and got some floss. And that's when I discovered I didn't have to get them back. There was a small pile of loose army men laying on the floor of the toy aisle, just hanging out as if they had tumbled there from nowhere. The other store had rejected them, sending them back to their point of origin, and I looked at the dental floss dubiously. I shrugged. It was for science. After all, I hooked it to the little base of the soldier and tossed it in. The army man disappeared into the space, and the dental floss kept spooling out as the greedy doorway to the whole box of minty rope. It came out quickly. Running out fast enough to make me think I might see smoke. And when the spool jerked as it hit the end, the little box fell out of my hand. It slid across the ground and went in too. I watched the door for a few seconds before going to see if both had gone back to their point of origin. Sure enough, the army man was in the toy aisle and the floss was in a pile on the dental aisle with the box beneath it. I picked up the dental floss and went to look for other things to throw through the doorway. I didn't really have anything living. Besides me, and I knew I could go through the portal. I settled for some bananas, but they too came back. Same with other fruits, but I had figured they would. Liquids were the same. The oil I splashed through the portal made a huge mess on the floor when it tried to go back, and I stopped after that. Nothing could go through the door other than me. Understood. That was day 8. On day 9, I looked at the data I had to see what it all meant. The only things I really knew about this place was that A, I couldn't leave. B, I could only go to copies of the same Dollar General. C, some of those copies were a little different but still similar. And D, only I could go between the places. And E, there was something else that could go between those places. It wasn't a lot to go by, but it was something. This place had rules, and rules were something I could work with. I spent a few days in that particular store, grabbing things at random and throwing them in to make sure the rules were constant. In the end, everything came back. Nothing was immune to the rules except for me. I looked for living things to throw in, but it appeared I was the only thing that lived here, which was concerning. Most stores try to keep themselves clean, but inevitably there will be bugs or even rats in a store. I checked under every shelf, in every corner, and behind every box and bag, but I couldn't find any of the usual signs of pests. No mouse crap, no spider webs, no roach bodies, no nothing. Maybe that was part of it too. I didn't know, but I made a note of it. Discover 6, there are no pests in the Dollar General beyond. After that, I decided I had done all I could do here. What else was I going to do in this store? What was I going to do in any other store? For that matter, I didn't know, but I realized that staying wasn't going to get me anywhere. I started to pack a few things but realized the futility. It would all just disappear when I went, but I did do something before moving on. I went and grabbed a permanent marker from the stationery section and drew a big letter B on the floor by the front door. I didn't know if it did, but if I ever rolled back through a store I had already been to, I wanted to be able to tell. That done, I stepped through the bathroom and into another Dollar General. It wasn't mine either, though. The store looked the same, but all the products were in a foreign language. I had taken Spanish in high school, but whatever the language was, it wasn't that. I thought it might be one of the Middle Eastern languages. I'd played enough Call of Duty and seen enough street graffiti to find it familiar but still unknown. Some of the food was different too. There were more regional cuisines, flatbreads, and strange meats, and the music playing overhead was something best described as pop with yelling. The automatic doors had also been replaced with a roll-down grate, and the grate was secured as if for the night. I ate a little of the food, the stuff that I didn't need to cook, and drew a big C on the floor near the doors before moving on again. I did this for a while, not really sure how long I was traveling, but leaving my signs behind. Some of the stores were set for different holidays. Some of them were in different languages. A couple of them had weird alien goods that I had no idea what were, and I moved on from these quickly. Some looked to be selling human meat and pieces of people. In some there was music. In some there was silence. In one the lights were black lights. In another, the floor was lit up and the ceiling was not. Some of the music was just static. In the store that sold human meat, the music was just the same screaming again and again. In all of them, I left a letter. In all of them, I hoped to find my way home and didn't. This was exciting at first. I was exploring unfound territory and seeing things that no one had ever seen before. I was a pioneer, a traveler, and I found myself filled with wonder as I hoped this trip would be my last. The different stores were cool, and I was never scared of what I saw. The rule had always been that I was the only living thing here. The rule had always been that there was nothing in any of these places that would hurt me. I had put the creature out of my mind, thought perhaps I had dreamed it, and as time went by, I couldn't tell you how long I spent just going from one to the next to the next. In some I spent days, in others I spent minutes. When I was tired, I slept. When I was hungry, I ate. When I had to go, I went. It wasn't until I drew a Z on the ground of a particular Dollar General, one with a strange mixture of French and Spanish products that all seemed to be made of lamb meat, that I realized how long I had been doing this. This was the 26th one I had been to. I had been going straight through many of them, and I had yet to see anything beyond the front door other than the murk of night of darkness or whatever. I hadn't found anyone else either, and that was beginning to worry me. I also hadn't run back over any of my letters, which was less worrisome, since it meant that there might not be an end to these stores. I found I'd been looking at the Z on the floor for several minutes before shaking it off and heading back for the bathroom. Nothing to do now but carry on. It would be another 7 stores before my ideas of being alone were challenged. The letters had replaced my days by then. I could have no more told you how long I had been here than I could have told you who the King of Spain was. I had begun leaving double letters after the Z, and I figured that at some point I would have to leave triple and quadruple. I tried to sleep as little as possible, keeping moving until I had to stop. And I was yawning as I went into a store I was already thinking of as FF. I walked into a familiar scene, though I knew it wasn't the place I'd thought it was. The store was wrecked, and it was the first one I had seen out of order since the store I had trashed. I wondered if I had come back full circle, but one look at the shelves was enough to tell me I hadn't done this. All the food was labeled in a strange language that I had no clue how to read, and the doors looked like an elevator, the metal doors firmly closed. As I moved about the store, I felt like something was watching me, and I found myself turning quickly as I tried to catch sight of it. It was the first movement I had seen outside my own as I walked past a mirror. It made me paranoid to feel something watching me, and I made a meandering path towards automotive so I could find something to swing if it came after me. The lights in the back hung down by broken chains, and as they flickered I saw what I was after. The 4-way lug wasn't a perfect weapon, but as the careful, furtive movement I'd been seeing suddenly turned into a wild and stunted charge. I gripped it tightly. I turned suddenly, smashing it into whatever was coming for me. But as I lifted it to swing again, I felt my fingers grow weak. It was a person. It was a person. It was a human. At least I thought it was. He was an old man, shirtless and hunched, and his skin looked tight as it clung to his ribs. He has clearly not been eating enough, and he lifted his stick-thin arms as he tried to defend himself from me. However long he had been here, he had lost the ability to speak in something recognizable. He sputtered and chirped, making something like animal noises as he held his bleeding head and moaned in pain. I didn't wait for him to get his wits about him. I dropped the wrench and took off, sprinting for the bathroom as I leaped through the door and into a new Dollar General beyond. This one had flowers, and Mother's Day decorations festooned every end cap. But all I could do was lay there and pull my knees to my chest. I had seen another person. I had attacked the only other person I had found. Well, technically he had tried to attack me first, but I was still coming to terms with what had happened as I tried to get myself together. The food here was normal, and as I ate, I pinned this addition to my journal. The notes here are all I have to prove I'm not going crazy. It seems there are others here, though they don't seem very friendly. I've already marked this store as GG and I'm preparing to take a rest for a little while before proceeding on. I don't know what else I'll find out there, but I still remain hopeful that it will be a way out. I'll keep you posted. Pray for me. I still hope to come out of this alive. I know it's been a little bit, or maybe it hasn't, but I hope you guys haven't worried about me too much. It's been a really productive few days lately. I met someone and he really helped me figure this out. He also helped me learn a few things that I wasn't aware of. Some things that scared the hell out of me. I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let me tell you what's happened since I last posted. I spent several days in GG, the store with the Mother's Day decorations, just getting my head together. You may have a hard time believing this, but I don't often have to attack people in my day-to-day life. Every now and again, you may have to bump chests with a rowdy customer at the sub shop. But I hadn't actually had to fight another human being since high school. The thought that I might have killed the guy was repugnant to me, and I was afraid to move on to the next one. What if I found another person like that? What if I found a whole tribe of them? The person who had slept below the shelves and prayed they would crush him seemed like worlds away from me. And I found that maybe I did want to keep living. After a few days of eating and feeling sorry for myself, I collected up the things that would come with me and stepped through the bathroom door again. I went back to my usual routine, but finding another person made me think. Was I the only one leaving markings? Was I the only one marking the stores in case I needed to find my way back? I looked around, but I never found anything beyond the usual graffiti or vandalism. Rude words scrawled on the door by the bathroom, sometimes in English, and sometimes not. I also found hearts with initials, catchphrases, and the usual things that children do. It meant nothing until I saw something different in KK. I had been traveling slower, really looking for the signs of other people, and that's when I found the bulletin board. I knew something was different when I walked into KK. The shelves weren't full like the others had been. They weren't empty. Not really. But they were sparse and looked picked over. Things were out of place too. This store had furniture, and some of it had been arranged in a way that made me think people had been sleeping close for comfort. The ceiling tiles were hanging down too, something I didn't like, and the music was nothing but harsh static. Also, there was a sign written on poster board in the front window. I blinked at it when I noticed it, thinking it might be mine. Someone had scrolled a similar message on the other side, but this side would only be seen by people already in the store. The writing was messy, scribbled with a magic marker, but it was readable, and it filled me with hope that the crazy hermit might not be the norm. If you can read this, check the bulletin boards in the break room. When I come back here, I'll answer your message. It was like a bomb going off in my head, and I kicked myself for not looking. How many break rooms had I been in? How many times had I used the microwave or opened the fridge to see what was inside? I had passed by the corkboard 1,000 times, but never once had I thought to read it. It would be things I had no interest in, things for employees, but it seemed now that might not be the case. I hurried behind the counter and went to check the board, finding a treasure trove of knowledge. Their name was Gale, and they had pinned a good many things there. Rules of the DG: don't go outside. There's nothing out there. The food runs out. So don't hog it all. The food doesn't go bad, so don't worry about that. Whatever you do here, stays here. Don't go into the ceiling. No one comes back from the ceiling. Don't be afraid to leave. There's nothing for you here once it's gone. Another piece of paper had a picture of a big dark creature that had been colored in with a crayon. The miasma. Don't let it see you or you'll die. Don't go into the ceiling or it will get you. The last one seemed to be a goodbye letter, and it was in the same handwriting as the others. I feel bad that I couldn't bury you properly, so let this serve as your memorial. Here lies Kenneth, Margot, Rudy, and Celine. They were the best crew anyone could ask for, and I miss them every day. Kenneth, who was never late for work and always so full of adventure, lost when he went outside. Margot, so full of life and hope, lost to the thing that lives in the ceiling. Rudy, my son, who wanted more than his old man could give him, lost in the ceiling when he went to go get Margot. Celine, who always made sure we ate before she would, went through the door when I was too cowardly and hard-headed. Let this stand as their gravestones. Let this tell their tale. I hope to find Celine when I go through that door. I'm still scared. I'm still hard-headed, but the food won't last forever, and I have to do something. If Rudy is out there somewhere, then I'd rather die trying to find him than starving to death in this place. To whoever reads this, don't be afraid to go through the door, and I hope to see you on the other side. Gail Thornton, Assistant Manager of Dollar General Beyond Story 4891. I didn't know whether I should leave anything or not. This looked like a memorial more than a notice board, but if Gail came back here, I wanted him to know that someone else was out there. Paper was easy to come by. Ditta pens, and I scribbled a hasty introduction before pressing it to the surface with a push pin. It looked lame beside Gail's words, but it was the best I had. I ate a little of what was left, leaving my mark before moving on. When I traveled now, besides leaving my mark, I always checked the bulletin boards. Sometimes there were messages from Gail, but mostly there weren't. Sometimes there were other messages though. Usually, it was people looking for people or people looking for people who were lost. Some of the bulletin boards looked like the missing walls at rest stops. And two that I saw a lot were someone looking for a boy named Jacob and someone looking for a dog named Buddy. Looking for my grandson Jacob, 5 years old, blue shirt, blue jean shorts, Skechers light up shoes. If you see him, keep him safe. He liked mac and cheese. Disappeared when he went to the bathroom on accident. Border collie named Buddy, black and white with some brown. Blue bandana around neck. Very sweet. Good service dog. Would love to see him again. The former made my blood run cold, and the more I tried to put it out of my mind, the more it stuck. Jacob. The name the old man had screamed as he lay bleeding. Was he Jacob? Was he the one looking for Jacob? I didn't know. But it didn't matter either. I couldn't get back to him and I had no clue where his grandson was regardless. I would leave notes of my own, letting them know that I was leaving the letters if they came across them, and telling them a little about the places I could remember. It was like having pen pals, except you were never sure whether they were getting your letters and you had no way to get letters back from them. In that respect, I guess it was more like sending messages in a bottle. It went on like that for a little. But when I came to BBB, I found out that someone had seen one of my messages and left a response. Dear Alphabet Man, very clever. I like your ingenuity. I'm glad you found the bulletin boards and have figured this place out a little. Hopefully, we can find each other someday. It would be nice to see a friendly face. Gail. Heart. I was thrilled. Finally, someone was responding back to me. I had felt guilty about not trying to communicate with the old man, but this made me feel a little better. If we could get together, we could share knowledge. If we could meet, then maybe we could figure this out. I kept going, each new store hoping to find Gail, but each new store seemed to find me a couple of steps behind. He was leaving messages, leaving answers to old messages sometimes, but I never seemed to catch him. Gail and I were moving through this space differently, it seemed, and Gail was better at it than I was. Gail, I came to believe, could move backward as well as forwards. 2 Alphabet Men saw your mark, the one labeled K. Be careful if you find yourself there again. Sometimes there are shadows there that like people a little too much. Gail, 2 Alphabet Man, I thought I had gone to the hermit store for a minute, but I see this may be where you began your journey. Try not to destroy any more of them. They aren't as infinite as you may believe. Gail, 2 Alphabet Men found your stovetop in the place you call SS. Hope the eggs were good. And thanks for leaving me some. Gail, this went on for 3 or 4 more trips before I found the message I was looking for. JH, the spot I had found myself in, looked very different from the other stores I'd been to. It looked picked clean, every shelf emptied and bare. Someone had collected a pile of things from the store and attempted to burn the door. It smelled like they had used lighter fluid to start, and the ceiling tiles by the door had fallen as they charred and left a wide gaping maw above the door. But, however, was none the worse for wear. I skirted the edge of the ceiling hole and made my way toward the break room. I didn't expect to find anything, but I was surprised to find the break room still intact. On the board was a message written on the back of a charred newspaper. Alphabet Man, I hate to leave you in a place like this, but if you keep to your current path, you should be here in a couple of days. Stay here for 2 sleeps. There is food in the back as well as water, and if I haven't made it by then, it means something has happened, and you should move on. With any luck, we'll meet up in 2 days' time. Looking forward to seeing you. Gail, I read the message a few times. Not sure if I wanted to stay here or not. This place was creepy, to be sure. But the chance to meet Gail was something I couldn't pass up. I checked on the food he had mentioned and found several days' worth of water and non-perishable foods that someone had stuck in the back. There was no sign of whoever had set the fire, and I hoped that I had the place to myself. I dragged some bedding and food to the break room, feeling that I'd rather hide in there than in the open, and settled in for the next couple of days. I kept the door to the break room closed, and if anything moved out there, I didn't hear it the first night. I mostly rested the next day, glad for the opportunity to do so. I had been going strong for a long time, resting when I was ready to fall down, and it was nice to get a little downtime. I wished it was somewhere a little nicer, but even this place told me things I didn't know. The doors, it seemed, were very resilient, but that made me wonder about Gail's story. He said that Kenneth had made it out those doors, and I wondered how such a thing was possible. The doors seemed unmovable, and the longer I thought about it, the more I couldn't wait to hear his story when he got here. As I settled in for the second night, though, I heard something groan from the main floor and huddled deeper under my blankets. It was the exact same sound I had heard as I lay under the shelves, and as I listened to it move through the bones of the store, I realized I had trapped myself in my pursuit of safety. If it came in here after me, I'd have no way to escape. But if I could make it to the bathroom, I could escape and touch base with Gale some other time. He would understand, especially if this was miasma. And I pushed the blankets away as I crept towards the door. I could hear it moving on the other end of the store, and as I opened the door, I prayed it wouldn't squeak. If it made a noise, it was unnoticed by the creature, and I prepared to make a break for it. Looking around the doorframe, I felt my ambition drain away as I caught sight of the creature in new terror. It was huge. Its shadowy form stooped over, and it looked like nothing I had ever seen. It was darkness, a living fog bank of midnight, and as my teeth threatened to clack, glanced at the bathroom and tried to steel myself for my run. That's when I saw something that pushed my apprehension away, and I was filled with renewed drive. Over by the bathroom, peeking around the side of the alcove, was a person in a red vest with a salt and pepper crew cut. He saw me too, and as he nodded his head, telling me to come there. He tossed something towards the back of the store. The bottle burst with a loud pop and the creature growled like a mudslide. It lunged towards the back, slamming into the back wall, and I took my chance and ran. It heard me then, turning its ponderous form as it tried to give chase, but I was out of its reach. Gale grabbed my wrist, and as we lunged through the bathroom door, the thing was mere inches behind us. As we lay outside the bathroom, the new Dollar General a pleasant sight after the burnt-out husk we'd come from. The man smiled at me and offered me a hand. "It's nice to meet you properly, Alphabet Man. I'm Gale, but I suspect you already figured that out." I know. It's been longer than you likely wanted to wait to hear more. I've been in a place the last few days that I've been calling Jab Zero. It's a place I've never been, but seems to be where Gale has been staying. There isn't any real difference between DG Zero and any other store, but Gale has been living there for, well, a long time and says it's his kind of base of operations. What's more, Gale can bring things between stores. When I asked him how, he said it was a trick he had learned, and that he might teach me if we had time. I laughed. Time was something we seemed to have a lot of. I honestly couldn't tell you how long I've been here. It never gets light out. There are no clocks inside the store. My phone time changes, but sometimes the dates and years jump ahead by years or back by centuries. Right now it says it's 3278 on Friday in September in 1632. I haven't received any replies to any of my messages or posts, but I honestly haven't checked much. I don't even really know if you guys are getting these anymore. I haven't seen a reply since the first installment, so if I haven't been responding, don't take it personal. I've certainly been a little busy. After all, before we go on, some differences between Zero and the other stores, but on to what you're dying to know. Gale is a middle-aged guy, probably about 40 or 45. He's still wearing his Dollar General uniform, complete with name badge, and he says that no matter what happens, it always comes back. The only thing that seems to stay with him are the bags under his eyes, and the guy looks tired. He made us dinner, soup and sandwiches, and toasted me with a pop from a brand I wasn't familiar with but turned out to be ginger ale. After eating a couple of bowls of stew and about 3 sandwiches, I hadn't eaten much of substances in a few days. We started talking. I told him about my life as a wage slave, and he commiserated. I know what that's like. I had actually just been transferred to this store when I got stuck here. How long ago was that? Oh, I asked. sitting back in the wicker chair he had brought from somewhere else and listening to it creak comfortably. Who knows? Gail said. When I left the world as I knew it, it was 1998, and I had just been sent to South Dakota to manage a new store. It's more pay and you can pick your own crew, my boss had said, and I was glad of more money. My ex-wife had just petitioned for more child support, the third time in as many years, and I was just trying to keep fed in a bed with my head above water, he said, laughing as he took a sip of the green can that called itself CO Firm. So I left Scottsdale, where I had been managing one of the few remaining J. L. Turner and Sons. And after looking through some applications, I decided that I liked the look of Kenneth, Celine, and Margot. Oh yeah. Wait. I remember there was another name on your memorial. When did Rudy come along? Gail looked away then, and I tried not to notice as he teared up a little. Oh yeah. How could I forget Rudy? I had been working at the store for a few months when he called me. Rudy was a lot older than his sister, from my first marriage when I was barely more than a kid myself, and he had been managing his own store in Texas. The store, however, had burned down suddenly one night, and he was wondering if my store had a position. I know you're the manager, Dad, but I'll do stock work if I need to. The noise around here makes me think that the locals don't like me any more than they like the store, and my apartment might go up in smoke next if I stay. Dollar General had run a few of the mom and pop stores in town out of business, you see, and the locals blamed Rudy and DG for that. I called corporate, asked if I could get funding for one more worker, and Rudy came to make it 5. We were tight-knit, working long hours and trying to compete in the local market. The mom and pops in Chamberlain were dead set against losing business to us, but we held our own and carved out a niche for ourselves. We didn't run the town, but we did okay. Then, one night we got robbed. Margot and I were manning the front, Kenneth was in the back, and Celine was staying over to look over the books. She had been an accountant before taking a job that was a little more flexible, and I had promised her some overtime if she would help me balance the receipts before our yearly audit next week. I wasn't even supposed to be there, but I was helping Margot through a busy time before the guy came in. We were getting ready to clean up after closing time so we could pass the audit, and Rudy was coming in around 8 to help. We'd all clean for a while, and then maintain through Sunday so we could be ready and fresh on Monday. We were just getting ready to close the doors at 8 when he barges in and pulls a gun. The guy had to be looking for drug money. He was out of his mind on something, and he rounded all of us up and put us behind the counter. He emptied the register, tried to get the safe, but it was on a timer that wouldn't even open until after 10. And made us empty our pockets and hand over our wallets. I was just thanking the universe that Rudy hadn't showed up when he popped up with a pizza after coming through the employee door around back. Thus, he joined the hostage situation. We all started out behind the counter, but the robber thought that there might be a silent alarm back there. So he moved all of us to break room, but thought we might gang up on us there. There was no door on the break room, so he finally decided to put us all in the bathroom and keep us penned up in there while he left. He herded us all through the door, and imagine our surprise when we came out in a different Dollar General. It was just like ours, except the doors wouldn't open. We didn't think about trying to go back through the bathroom. And good thing too. These Dollar Generals don't seem to look back on themselves. The bathroom only takes you to a different one. Never back the way you came. But you go back to different ones. I put in. He smiled. In due time, my friend. You probably remember the first Dollar General you stayed in for a while. I imagine it got a little boring after a while, didn't it? I nodded, telling him it had only taken me about a week to be done with it. Well, a month. Imagine that times 5. At first it a lot of fun. We played games, spent time together, and kind of felt like a real family. Rudy and Margot had been having a not-so-secret relationship for months, and Kenneth and Margot and I hung out a lot outside of work. We cooked dinners. We made crafts. We built puzzles. And for a little while it was great. After a couple of weeks, though, we all started going a little cabin crazy. The sun never rose. The lights never went out. And the doors never opened. We didn't know how we were being kept here, but some of them started trying to find out. He took another sip of the ginger ale, as if wetting his throat for a long story. and pressed on. It started with Kenneth. Kenneth was an avid hiker and liked to explore. He wanted to see if the space outside the DG was the same as ours. But he couldn't get the doors open. He pushed and pulled, tried to break the glass, tried to wedge the doors open, but it was no use. He tried for 3 days to get outside, and on the 4th day something happened. Something that showed the rest of us that we might not have been as alone as we thought. The doors opened. Kenneth had been shoving at it for most of the day, trying to get the front door open and failing miserably. He finally threw it down, like a child having a tantrum, and kicked it half-heartedly with his foot. Then, to his astonishment, it opened as smoothly as it ever had. Outside was nothing but smooth darkness, like the waters of a deep lake by night. And when he took his first step, I told him not to. I felt like something out there was wrong, some place we weren't meant to go to. But he was powerless to stop himself. He stepped out into that darkness, and as he passed between the doors, they slammed shut behind him. I've never seen them open like that again, and they never opened for him to come back in again. He glanced at the doors to the Dollar General he had chosen to take up residence in, and when I glanced at it, I noticed someone had piled things in front of it. Card racks and newspaper racks and other things blocked it, as if it might open and tempt him out again. Some of them weren't in English. Some of them had odd dimensions to them, and it was clear he had ranged wide to find some of these things. Then Margot got snatched by whatever lurks in the ceiling. I call it the miasma, the thing that came after you in the burnt-out store. Had you seen it before then? Once. I admitted. Bet it was right after you started messing with the ceiling. Wasn't it? I nodded guiltily. Rudy and Margot had been looking for a way out as well. They decided that they could get out through the roof. But when they took some of the tiles down, they discovered a deep bank of darkness up there. It was just like the stuff outside the door, and when Rudy reached out to touch it, I told him not to. Rudy was a good kid, and he knew better than to touch something I was that worried about. The two of them were young, though, and when they called me over to see something, I watched as he tossed a tennis ball into the void. They had about 4 empty cans of tennis balls on the floor, and when I asked if they had all gone in, Rudy said they had. When I asked how many had come out, he told me none. I didn't think anything of it. And when he threw the cans up there, none of them came down either. I was settling and getting ready for bed. Celine already snoozing on the little sectional pieces we had all pushed in close together, when the light went out. This was alarming because the lights had never gone out before. The light stayed on all the time, which was why it was so hard to tell what time of day it was, or how long you have actually been here. There was a weird growling noise and I heard someone scream from out in the darkness. Something fell over then and I grabbed Tilene as the two of us burrowed under our pile of blankets. I was worried for Rudy and Margot, but at that point in time I was more concerned with surviving until the lights came back on. Something stumped close to Hughes, making a lot of racket as it pushed things around. But after a while the lights came on again, and we surfaced to find some shelves shoved over, and a lot of things crushed and smashed. Rudy found us not long after that, saying that he and Margot had seen a monster come out of the ceiling. It had grabbed her as he ran for the manager's office, and when the lights came back on, he had found the same mess we had. When I asked him what it looked like, he said it was hard to tell with the lights off. He drew that picture you saw in the break room, and for a while that was the best description we had of the miasma. Rudy was sullen for a few days, looking at the hole in the ceiling, but I told him to leave it be. It had clearly come out because we had messed with it, and if we left it alone, it would leave us alone. He wanted to go look for Margot, said he thought if he went up there he might be able to find her. But I told him to forget about it. We had lost 2 people already, and the thought of losing my son was difficult to think about. About 3 days later, I woke up to find a letter saying he was going to find Margot, and a ladder set up directly under the ceiling. I climbed it, meaning to go in and get him back. But after standing on that top rung and looking into the murk for nearly an hour, I finally climbed down and put the ladder away. It was just Colleen and I. We sat in silence for a few minutes, lounging on the padded sectional pieces that I now questioned whether or not had once been their sleeping arrangement. "I'm tired," he said, his voice hollow as he lay back. "Let's continue this after some shut-eye." He rolled away from me, facing the chocolate upholstery, but I doubted he slept. At some point I dozed off after trying to ignore his quiet sobbing, and woke up to find coffee, eggs, bacon, and toast. Figured you might want a nice hot breakfast after what we went through yesterday with that thing. Don't worry, it's all scavenged from stores like ours. None of it's human meat or weird animal parts or anything. I hadn't thought of that, but it was certainly an interesting concept. As we ate, he finished. Celine went last, and she may not even be dead. I was distraught after Rudy, just sitting there and feeling sorry for myself. But Celine had been experimenting with the door we had come through. She told me how she opened it to find yet another Dollar General beyond that, and when she threw things into it, they came back. I just sat, not taking in any of it. And then one day she came up to me and said she was leaving. I looked up to find she was wearing a backpack and had put on a floppy gardening hat. Going? I asked, not understanding. Going where? We can't go anywhere. We're stuck here. The food is beginning to dwindle, even with just the two of us eating. It won't last much longer, and I don't intend to starve here. If that doorway took us here, then it can take us out again maybe. Come with me, even if we go somewhere else. It's got to be better than here. There might be food, or maybe Rudy and Margot are there. Maybe Kenneth is somewhere different too. Either way, if we stay here, we're going to die. Come with me. We can start over somewhere else. I wanted to. I really did. But at that point I was at my lowest. My family had abandoned me. My son had left too. And now the last of my friends was deserting me. I turned away, saying nothing. And when she left, I just sat there. She never came. At least not as far as I know. And I've never seen her in any of the stores I've traveled to. I sat there for a long time, just stewing. But eventually I was down to canned goods and the big jugs of water. When the water ran out, I drank from the fountain. When the canned good ran out, however, I started looking at the door too. There was food on the other side of that door. I could see it. And without thinking about it, I stepped through. I was in a brand new Dollar General, fully stocked with food and set up for Christmas, and that was how it all started. I never stayed long in any store then. I just kept moving, hoping I would find Celine or Ruddy or anyone. I found a few people, but the ones I found were usually scared or half crazy, and I moved on quickly. One fella, an older guy in a half-destroyed store, stabbed me with pruning shears as I went through his place. I gasped, but when he pulled up his shirt and pointed at a spot about midway up his belly, I didn't see anything. Not a scar, not a red mark, nothing. It looked as fresh as new skin, and he laughed when I looked surprised. Luckily for me, I was close enough to the door to make it through, and that's when I made my biggest discovery. I fell through the door, grabbing at the shears so I didn't push them in deeper, and found they were gone. So was the wound. You've probably noticed that no matter how ragged your clothes get, that they always repair themselves when you pass through the door, right? Well, it's the same with your body. Burns, cuts, stabs. They all heal when you go to a new store. I've had all manner of things wrong with me, but a new store always means a new me. We sat there for a few minutes, each of us digesting something different, it seemed. Did you ever find Rhodey or Margot or Kenneth? I finally asked, already guessing the answer. It was several minutes before he responded, and I wasn't sure he would for a minute. No, he finally said. They went beyond the Dollar General beyond. The store protects us, insulates us to a certain degree, but if we go beyond, then we are lost. I've watched the store change over the years, new items added, new layouts and concepts, but I've stayed the same. I was 43 in '98, and I still look exactly the same as I did then. I haven't aged, and neither will you. The store traps us, keeps us like this, and plays with us until it inevitably breaks us. And there's nothing we can do about it. He looked sad, but when he turned back, his smile had returned. But, Harrison, he said, there are things we can do to make it harder for them to break us. Things I can show you. Gale's promised to teach me what he knows, and I'm eager to learn. I I think I've shared enough for now. Gail's asleep and I can tell that the tapping from my phone is bothering him. I'll update you guys again a little later. Until then, don't get stuck in the Dollar General beyond either. Or we might have to come find you as well. Till next time. Gail has taken me under his wing and is showing me his secrets to surviving in here. He's a good teacher, and I'm learning some tricks for navigating the DGBs. It's hard to explain it all, but I'm going to try my best. A lot of it is mental preparation and association, which is really hard to teach. But Gail is a pretty good teacher and I'm starting to get the hang of it. The first lesson was how the DGBs work. All the Dollar Generals are like spokes on a bike tire. They all move forward, never backward. You can't go back simply by going through the door. Wherever you entered from is your first spoke on the wheel. That's why everyone's journey starts at a different part. My first spoke is different from yours, and my last spoke will be different from yours. There are a nearly infinite number of Dollar Generals. At least I've never seen one repeat itself by going through the door. I'm sure there must be an end to them, but I'm not sure I want to see what that looks like any more than you do. Are you with me so far? I nodded. But thinking about it made my head hurt a little. Traveling the spokes, the stores, is easy. You just go through the door. Navigating the stores is a little harder. The way I did it was to think of the stores as spokes on a wheel, but a wheel needs a hub. This store is my hub. It's the middle point where I come to get out of the wheel. Technically, it's a spoke too, but thinking of it as a hub helps ground yourself. You get it. I waffled a little, not wanting to admit that it was a little over my head. Kinda? So, Gail laughed. Don't worry. You'll pick it up. It's like riding a bike. Once you do it, it's easy. In that he wasn't wrong. Lesson number 2 was traveling with people. So, if you're traveling with other people, you have to be touching them for the two of you to travel together. Here, put a hand on my shoulder, he said as he prepared to step through the door. I slid a hand on his shoulder and we stepped through together into a familiar store. It was KK, the place I had found Gail's bulletin board. See, he said. That's how we came out in my Dollar General when we left the miasma behind. I had a hand on your back, so we came through together. That made sense. And we proceeded with lesson 3, traveling to specific places. You've done yourself a favor by leaving marks behind. At first I was popping around to stores I remembered, like the ones with weird letters or the ones with strange things in them. But once I started leaving my own markings, I could travel to specific places. Pick out one of the stores you've been to before, and let's go there. He put a hand on my shoulder this time, but when I walked through the door, we came out on LL instead of GG, the store with the Mother's Day decorations. I was a little disappointed, but Gail patted my shoulder reassuringly. It's tricky, he assured me. Took me a while to figure it out too. Let's try again. Picture the marks you left. Close your eyes and get a good mental picture, and then step through the door. I tried it again. And really focusing on the twin G's. But when I stepped through this time, it was to find myself in an older location with a single G on the floor. When I told him I'd goofed again, however, he told me it was progress. You're getting the hang of it. Going to G when thinking ugh GG is pretty damn close. Keep practicing. We spent a while just traveling from one store to the next. Sometimes it got close. Sometimes I just moved forward. But after a while I started to travel to the right destination sometimes. It was something that took a lot of focus. And when I put a hand to my head and told him I was getting a headache, Gail suggested we take a break, have a rest, drink some water or Gatorade or maybe some coffee and just kind of take it easy for a bit. It isn't something you can get right away. It takes practice. And even I sometimes get it wrong after all this time. I can't say how long we were at it, but for what must have been a few days we worked on pinpointing my navigation through the stores I had been to already. I saw a lot of familiar places, though Gail refused to go to the meat market store as he called it. He said he had encountered shadows there that thought he might be for sale and he had barely escaped with his life. I figured I must have gone while they were closed and counted myself lucky. After a while I could travel pretty well between stores without too much trouble. And when Gail was pretty confident that I had the process down, he suggested we move on to something else. Lesson 4 involved bringing other things with you to other stores. So your clothes travel with you because you don't think about them coming with you. It's like your nose or your hands. They're a part of you and your mind just assumes that they will. Now I want you to take a good look at yourself and visualize what you look like in your clothes. Once you have it committed to memory, then you can add things to it and take them with you. He had me practice in front of a full-length mirror, inspecting myself and committing my clothes to memory. The clothes weren't hard. I had worked at the same place for years and was very aware of what my uniform looked like. No, the hard part was adding to it. I found the most colorful backpack in the store, but committing it to memory was difficult. If it wasn't just right, then it wouldn't come with me. And Gail assured me that the backpack was all I needed to get right. Once you have the backpack down, everything you zip inside is inside. You don't really have to remember it because it's inside the bag and you know it's inside the bag. Once you have the bag down, the rest is cake. That one took a while and gave me many headaches. Sometimes the bag wouldn't come with me. Sometimes the bag would, but the things inside wouldn't. Sometimes the bag would, but I would concentrate so hard on the bag that I wouldn't travel where I wanted to go. Sometimes I would load it up with stuff and find the bag had stayed where I had been. Gail told me to be diligent, and after a while it came together. I couldn't say how long that was, but it had to be months. We went about my training the same way I had gone about traveling. When I was tired, I slept. When I was hungry, I ate. When I had to go, I went. Gail had an answer for the solid waste too, and it made me laugh when he explained it. The place with the burnt roof is where I take all my crap to. I figure if it's where that thing moves around the most, he is welcome to it. We went there when we had a bunch of it. Gail putting it in a hefty bag and sealing it in his backpack. He tossed it into the gaping ceiling and ran. The two of us coming back to dead zero like kids after a prank. Gail said he always waited till he had a whole bag to throw it out and he hoped the creep liked his little presents. Gail and I became good friends, but I think it was more than that for him. Sometimes when he clapped me on the shoulder, there was an almost parental gleam in his eye. We ate together. We slept near each other. We talked a lot, and we became close quickly. We talked about his travels, the things he had seen in the more than 20 years he had been moving through the Dollar Generals. But eventually we landed on a top I had been hoping he knew something about. How far in have you been? I asked one night as we were cooking marshmallows over a propane burner. Gail thought about it as he slid the mess between graham crackers and chocolate. I've marked up to 218, I think. Do you? I thought about my question a little more as I chewed over my own s'more. Do you think anyone have made it out? I said, slurring a little as the treat stuck to my mouth. I don't know, he said. If they did, I don't suppose we would know. Not unless they left notes. I nodded, taking a sip of lukewarm cocoa to clear the roof of my mouth. Surely the stores can't go on forever. There has to be an end. Gail shrugged. I suppose. It wouldn't make sense for them to go on that long. I almost hope there isn't, though. If there is an end, then there's only so much food, water, and supplies. We will eventually starve to death here, and that's a bleak prospect. We went to bed not long afterward, but I never stopped thinking about that infinite loop of perfectly odd Dollar General stores. What would be at the end? If there was one, would it be an exit? Would it be where the creature lived? Was the end what lay outside or in the ceiling? I had no answers, so I drifted off thinking about the possibilities as the fluorescent hummed overhead. Gail and I started exploring more after that, and I think he was looking for other people to add to our group. We could go see if the hermit wants to join our band, I asked, and Gail laughed bitterly as he pointed to his stomach. Maybe give him a chance to finish what he started too. I wasn't surprised to hear that the hermit had been the one to stab him, but I did wonder why he never traveled. We never saw him while we were out getting things, and we avoided his little corner like the plague. FF was strictly off limits, and I now realized I had gotten off very lucky in our exchange. I don't know how long I spent with Gail, but it felt like years. I know I say that a lot, but it's hard to convey how strange time is on that side. Time is something I'm used to counting, used to hoarding like a dragon, but here it isn't something I have to think about. What's more, I don't know if anyone is even getting these updates, and if they are, how quickly or slowly they're getting them. Are they coming in daily? Weekly? Are you reading this year's from each message? Are your children seeing them and having vague memories of something their parents told them when they were very small? Are all the Dollar Generals, beyond or otherwise. Stones beneath the foundation of some other store. Does the name mean anything to those who may or may not be reading it? I don't know. I write these updates because it feels right. I write them because I feel like I should. I've gotten pretty good at traveling now. I can travel back and forth, carry supplies, hold things in my hand and travel, change my clothes and bring them back with me. And it makes me proud and a little afraid. With two of us, Gail and I have used some of the dolly loaders to move the shelves around in our hub. We've opened up the floor plans and now we have all this space for activities. I know, cheesy, but it's a classic. I've started keeping a journal of the different Dollar Generals and the beyond so that I can remember which ones are which. Here's a few store FF designation dangerous, highly, food none people one theme destroyed home of the crazy hermit. Beware this store. The shelves are bare of food. The hermit has hoarded it all somewhere safe. Could be secrets here, but they will be hard to find. Store JJ designation dangerous, moderate, food minimal people none theme waste disposal where we drop out waste. A fire took out most of the store a long time ago. The food here is all non-perishable stacked up in the back. Known location where the miasma comes out. Store T designation dangerous, low moderate, food plentiful strange people. None shadow creatures a possibility themed strange human meat market. This is the place where you may encounter shadow creatures. The shelves contain what appears to be human meat and the store smells like coppery. My research partner claims to have been accosted by these creatures, so proceed with caution. Stuff like that. I'm working on a more complete study of them. Now that I can take my notes and things with me without putting them on my phone, which will run out of space eventually. And I'm hoping to make a complete study of the DGBs. That's all for now. I'll shoot you an update when we have one. Sitting here writing this out. Listening to Gail snore. It's nice to have someone to talk to and just be with. I hope it's something that will last. Hey everyone. Hope you're still reading these or even seeing them. It's been an interesting little journey so far and I thought it might be past time for an update. Gail and I have been traversing the stores, getting supplies and mapping the different setups. And I've seen more stores in the short time I've been with Gail than I had in all the time I was on my own. I've seen places where the shelves are made of smoke. I've seen places where the ceiling and floor are reversed. And I've even seen stores I think might be on another planet. The languages vary in many of them, and some of them aren't even dialects I think are native to Earth. I've made some notes on them and I hope to write them down for you a little later. But for now I have to tell you about something that's led us to think we might not be the only ones who can travel through intent. We had gone back to KK, practicing my movements, and I was getting ready to go to another one when Gail stopped me. Something is wrong, he said, looking around. He was looking around as if expecting to see something obvious, but the answer wasn't quite that simple. The store wasn't what you would call in any kind of order. And it reminded me of the store I had trashed. Shelves were moved. Things were tossed about. And the mess was everywhere. Gail could talk about not wrecking the stores, but it appeared he had done just that to his own first stop. As such, it took us a couple of minutes to notice that the sign in the window was missing. Someone had taken it down and torn it in half. Gail looked at the pieces in confusion, not sure what to make of it, but looked to the break room as if the culprit would still be in there. They weren't, but they had left their handiwork there as well. They had ripped the bulletin board down and smashed it in the floor. Gail stood looking at it like someone had desecrated a grave, and I could see him trembling in barely contained rage. "Who's done this?" he whispered, his voice full of pain. "Who has torn down my board?" He picked it up, checking over the ruined front. As I started looking for clues, there wasn't much to go off. But I did find a couple of things that the perpetrator had left behind. There was a scrap of cloth that had gotten caught in the door when whoever it was had left. There was a shoe print on the wall under the spot where the board had been, the tread visible, as if it had been made by something gross. The last tied it all together, and the smell of it made me gag a little as it hit me. Someone had taken a dump in the floor near the manager's desk and then trod through it on their way out the door. "Friggin' animal," I said, covering my nose as I took a step back. I bumped into Gail then, and he seemed to have seen it too. He took the bulletin board back with him, but the damage was definitely done. I asked him if he had any idea who could have done this, but he didn't seem to have an answer. He sat looking at the board, the cork board the only reminder of his lost friends, and I wondered if he was going to be okay. Someone, or something, had gone in and wrecked his remembrance plaque. I say something because as far as we knew, we were the only people who could travel with any accuracy. If there were others, then why hadn't we found them yet? I sat with him for a little while, hoping he would snap out of it. After a while, though, I decided to leave him to his thoughts. I'd go and find something to make to cheer him up, a nice meal or something sweet, and hopefully he'd be back to his old self. I was heading to WWW, a very special place that I discovered before meeting Gail but didn't entirely understand. When I first came to it, the floor didn't feel right, and the whole place smelled like food. When something dripped onto me as I stood studying it, I immediately went through again and stepped out onto XX. I told Gail about it after we met, and he laughed and offered to take me there. When he showed me the true nature of the place, though, I understood what a cool store I had run from. Here, I'll show you my journal entry on it. Maybe that will shed some light on the situation. WDU store designation low to no danger people none theme dessert shop. WW is a store made entirely out of dessert items. The shelves are made of chocolate, the floors of marzipan, and the ceiling drips with endless whipped cream. Everything there is edible, all the packages, the products, even the walls and furniture are fit for consumption. It's a great place to find a sweet treat. Pretty cool, right? There really is a store for everyone. I closed my eyes and prepared to step through, wanting to grab something sweet. But as I stepped through, I thought I had made a mistake. I still stepped into the wrong Dollar General about 20% of the time. I'm far from perfect. But as the overwhelming smell of chocolate assaulted my nostrils, I realized I had gone to the right place after all. The walls, the shelves, the floor. They were all still made of confection, but their composition had changed drastically. Most of the shelves lay in chocolate shambles. The packages that were uneaten had been scattered or stomped on, and their contents were spread across the floor. The packages left smears across the ground, and the smears were worked deep into the marzipan. The ceiling was untouched, but it was a little bit out of reach. The mess was impressive, like something a wild animal might do when cornered and trying to escape. And I started looking for a source of all this destruction. It seemed familiar somehow, like a place I had seen before. And I felt the hairs prickle on my neck as I went. I found a candy cane of all things lying by the base of a shelf and held it firmly between my hands as I went deeper into the store. As I rounded an aisle, I saw something scuttle out of sight. As my foot came down in an extra thick splat of whipped cream, I heard the skitter of something that ran along on all fours. I kept checking my peripherals, listening for the subtle scrape of feet. And when something finally lunged at me, I brought the hooked end of the candy bludgeon around and cracked the end on the face of my attacker. I brandished the broken tip, ready to fight whatever had come for me. But it was the last thing I expected to find sprawled on the floor. It was him, the hermit. He was righting himself, getting up on his hands and knees and hissing at me like a wild animal. His grimy clothes were smeared with chocolate and food, and his hands were caked with the store's leavings. He seemed more feral than he had the last time I'd seen him. And when he threatened to lunge again, I shoved the broken end of the candy cane at him, and he scampered back smartly. "Get back," I yelled, and for a wonder he did. He ran for the bathroom and plunged through the door, leaving the store in disarray and leaving me with questions. I traveled to XX, following on his heels, but he was nowhere to be found. There was no way that he could travel like Gail and I could. But I suppose that would explain how he had gone to Gail's old store and messed up his board. It seemed impossible. The guy was crazy. But the more I thought about it, the more it seemed like it had to be him. Who else could it be? We'd encountered no one besides the hermit. And if it wasn't him, then the prospects seemed even more fearful. I went back to Deb Zero to give Gail the bad news and found him seated at the desk we'd put together and fixing his sign. I ran into the hermit. I told him when he didn't look up. "What the hell were you doing in FF in the first place?" "He wasn't in FF," I said, hesitating a little as he looked up in confusion. "I was in WWW. He's made a real mess of it." Gail sat back and I could see that he had recreated the board as it had been when I'd first seen it. The warnings, the story, the pages of remembrance to his old friends. They had all been lovingly recreated, and it did my heart good to see it restored. It deserved to be here. Anyway, IT was important to Gale and we should have protected it. It doesn't make sense, Gale said. He's never shown any inclination about leaving before. He's always stayed in FF for as long as I've known him. Are you sure about that? I asked. When I showed up there wasn't a lot of food left and there's no way he's been living there all this time without a source of food. Gale shrugged. I never thought about it like that. Mostly I just avoid FF because that's where I've always encountered him. I guess he must be traveling. But how does he know how to get back is what I want to know. It's not impossible, but he's about half crazy. You can't tell me that a guy like that can figure out how to travel with any real destination. I done know, I said. How long has he been here? Anyway. He was the first person I encountered when I set out traveling, and I had been traveling for quite some time when I met him. I don't know if he was here before me, but I suspect that he might have been. I guess maybe he wasn't always crazy, but that's just speculation. Any rate, if he's wrecking up the stores, then we need to stop him. Like I told you once, there's no proof that the store, or the resources they hold, are infinite. If we're going to survive here, then we need to stop him from making that harder. What's the plan then? I asked. But that's where today's story ends. Gale and I are creating a plan to stop the old guy from wrecking up the stores, but it's something we have to approach carefully. He's crazy and dangerous, and if we don't want to get hurt or killed, then we can't go in half-cocked. Gale has started keeping a close eye on our Dollar General, and we've started going into other stores with weapons. If he attacks us, we'll be ready, hopefully, and we can take him alive. As promised, though, here are a couple of excerpts from my store drawer journal. Upside down store, designation low, danger people, none theme, upside down. This store is like a regular store, only upside down. The shelves stay on the ceiling and the food doesn't fall off them and come up, so there must be some sort of weird gravity. Gravity doesn't seem to have reversed for us. However, us. So we walk on the ceiling and find all the shelves unreachable. Gale. However, suggested using a step ladder, and it's possible to reach high enough to pick some of the items down to us. The place makes me dizzy if I spend too much time there, and it's a real trip. S Street Store, designation moderate people, shadow drivers, theme street fair shops is a perfectly normal street, with bay booths set up that have items. It's all still inside. But the ground is concrete, and there are garbage cans and street lamps and graffiti in odd areas. The only real danger present is that sometimes cars drive up the road part of the street. They don't go very fast and they're not hard to get out of the way of. But if they hit you, it could kill you or hurt you. The shadow people who drive them look like living shadows and they don't get out, so they aren't any trouble. As long as you stay out of the center of the street, then you should be fine. The food is normal, but aside from shelves, there are also these odd little food stalls that just seem to have cooked food in them. You shout what you want into the stalls, and if they cook it, then you can just watch it make itself. It's wild, but a nice little change up from the norm. The stalls have a finite amount of resources, but if they run out of food, then they put out a closed sign. There are 8 streets and they have sidewalks beside the shelves. The cars don't seem to come from anywhere in particular and don't seem to go anywhere either. The exit is a tunnel with a crossbow blocking it off. I've talked to Gale about going into the tunnel to see what's on the other side, but he is staunchly against it. We spent some time making plans, but very little was decided on. The hermit had been dealt with. That much was clear, but it was the house that kept eluding us. We could take him alive, but then we'd have to guard him. We could kill him, but none of us were sure we could kill someone. He had to be stopped. But how could we do it? First thing we have to do is find him, Gale said. If he can travel, then he might be anywhere. We need to track him down and see where he is. If he's going back, then FF would be a good place to start. True, Gale said. If nothing else, we might find out more about him. What's to know? He's a crazy old dude, I said, adding a length of rope to my bag. If we were going to his lair, then there was a good chance we could set a trap for him. True, but was he always? I don't know how long this old guy's lived in the Dollar General beyonds. He could have come here when they were still called J. L. Turner and Son. Hell? Crazy dude could be Cal Turner for all I know. Who? I asked, not having a clue what he was talking about. Sorry, I don't know why I would have expected you to know the store's history. Cal Turner took over after his father died and officially named the store Dollar General after that. Word was that he went missing sometime after opening the first one. Just stepped into one of his own stores and was never seen again. His son ran them when I worked there. But I suppose he'd be an old man by now. Cal and Carl, his son, looked a lot alike, and it took the company years to admit that the owner was gone. Some people say he just became a recluse. But I knew managers who were close to the family, and they swore that the rumors were true. Anyway, I doubt the old man is Cal. He'd been older than hell and likely twice as crazy. I didn't like to think about another lost soul trapped here, but it did make me wonder how many others could be prisoners here. I have no clue how long I've been here, but I know it hasn't been very long when compared to Gail, and Gail believed the old man had been here longer than that. If people didn't age, then who was to say that Cal Turner might not be in here somewhere? Who was to say that there might not any number of people traversing the infinite? Or not so infinite? Dollar Generals, if there were. However, then why hadn't they met any of them? Have you ever met anyone else? I asked before I could think better of it. Besides you, Gail said, smiling a little as he thought about it. No one other than the hermit and Colleen. I guess. He got a little speculative then. Thinking about his friends always made him quiet and thoughtful, and I hated that. Gail was a good dude, and I didn't think he should be inundated with the guilt over people he had no control over. He had done his best, plain and simple, and they had done what people do. Hey, I asked suddenly as I slid a cold coffee drink into my backpack. If he's going through the doors, then shouldn't he stop being crazy? Gail cocked his head at me. What do you mean? Well, you said that all injuries and damage to clothes and stuff are fixed when you go through the door again. If he's rattled from his time here, then shouldn't he be kinda, I dunno, reset or something when he goes through? Gail pulled his bottom lip into his mouth, chewing it as he thought the question over. The doors had always healed anything that was wrong with us in the past. Whether it was a wound or ripped clothing, it always fixed us, and we were pretty reliant on it for clothes and general fixes. If the crazy hermit was able to travel while remaining in his wrong mind, then maybe the doors didn't reset you as much as we had thought. Hell, Rud. I don't know. Maybe he's messed up enough in the head that he thinks that's just how he is. A certain amount of what we do with the doors only happens in our heads. I don't claim to understand it all. Sometimes it works differently for different people. It works the way it works for you because that's how it works for me, and I'm the one who taught you. He may have learned differently, so it works differently for him. I guess. Maybe. We can ask him when we grab him. I nodded, trying to ignore that he had called me Rude again. Rud, or Rudy, had been his son, and the more comfortable he got with me, the more often he slipped up. I didn't mind. Not really. If he thought of me as his son, then I was okay with that. No, it was Gail who seemed to mind. Even now he had realized what he had said, and his face had gotten stormy. I knew he was still looking for Rudy, still looking for all of them, but the chances of finding them seemed to dwindle the longer they stayed gone. Rudy had gone after another of Gail's original group, but it seemed that no one came back from the ceiling. I was already trapped in Dollar General Beyond. I wasn't in a huge hurry to get trapped somewhere else. Got everything? Gail asked, pulling on his pack and taking up his club. We had never really carried weapons. Not like this. But after finding the hermit in other stores but his, we had started taking them with us. We had taken wooden chair legs and hammered nails into them. They weren't very sturdy. They were mostly spiky particle board, but they would do in a pinch. We had taken some of the hoodies off the rack and sewn cardboard into them. They weren't great, but they would do too. The cardboard wouldn't do a lot, but it was the best we could manage. Ready, I said, making the chunky sweater as comfortable as I could before we set off. I wanted to start an FF, but Gail said we should check a few key places first. I have some safe houses that I want to make sure he hasn't hit yet. It's nothing impressive, just some food and things that I've come across in my travels. I made notes as we went, and here is where we went for my journal. It's starting to come along, but I know it's a drop in the ocean in the long run. B. Normal fall store. Designation low danger people 0 theme fall decor. B is a perfectly normal Dollar General that's been set for fall. It had pumpkins and scarecrows, and some of the Halloween decorations are there, but not all. It has some seasonal items. But it seems to be the start of autumn selection and doesn't contain as much as it would by the end of October. Gale had apparently been here before and left a go bag. He went to the manager's office and opened up the red box that usually held the fire extinguisher. Instead, there was a backpack that Gale took out and unzipped. He looked over the things inside, talking under his breath as made sure it was all still there. Okay, I didn't think you would have come this far, but it was a possibility. Let's go to the next one. We did a quick check before heading out, but everything appeared to be in place. The things I had used were gone, but nothing else seemed to be taken or moved. We still weren't sure that he could take things with him. But as we moved on, we were in full data collection mode. Night store, designation moderate danger people, zero theme, a dark store with lamps, dainty as a shadowy place, and one of the few stores without the buzzing overhead lights. It's lit by tall metal street lamps and the light they make doesn't go far. It does not appear to have a ceiling. Any attempt to shine a light up there reveals nothing, and Gale thinks that it's likely it's there to simulate the night sky. Some of the shelves are pushed over, and I suspect that the miasma can come and go here freely. We have never encountered him here, but it seems likely we could, and we do not linger here. Gale hit the ground running when we got to None of us like to be here, but he felt like it might be a good place to hide something because of the environment. The whole store was pitch black and lit by these interspaced lampposts that cast a yellow glow over the shelves. He reached between two shelves and took out a duffel bag, handing me the light as he went through it on the run. He didn't like coming here any more than I did, and when he had established that everything was there, he zipped it, and we headed out. There was a sound as we came to the door, something like a moaning wind from the shadowy ceiling, and we were through before we could discover what it was. Cave store, designation highly danger people, zero theme, a store inside a cave. Is a store inside a cave. As the name entails, the lighting is glowing fungus that baths everything in a mysterious glow. The shelves are carved into the stone and some of the items are made of rock. In the middle of the store is a pool of water that is okay to drink from, but contains a monster. Gale says it's a big crocodile or something and that it comes out to walk around on occasions. It chased us the last time we were there, and it's easily 10 feet long. There are bats that hang from the ceiling, though Gale isn't sure what they eat since there are no bugs here. He's never seen the movie either, so no one is sure what they can do. The food here is refrigerated by the cave. That is 65 at all times, and nothing seems to spoil or go bad. We came into the cave store looking for the creature who lived here. We had been here a few times. The store had a great selection of mushroom, and last time we had come face to face with the gator who lived here. I hadn't really believed Gale when he told me about it, but it was hard to deny when you were face to face with the monster. He had a long snout like a crocodile, and his scales seemed to shift through a series of colors as he came hissing after us. He was slow, thankfully, and we got out before he could catch us. But I suppose that put my rule about no living things in the dab into question. He was in his pond today. At least we assumed he was. And Gale pushed a rock aside as he took out another backpack that he checked over. Most of these bags had things like first aid kits, non-perishable foods, and tool kits that could be used to set up traps or snares. Gale had set them up just in case he needed to secure another store or travel to Infinite for a while, and I was sure that these weren't the only ones. Gale had been here long enough to set up safe houses in several stores, and the one in Jab Zero was just the first in a long line, I was sure. Okay, Gale sighed, pushing the rock back into place. He hasn't found any of these. I can't think that he has any real skill with travel, but if we haven't come up on him, then he must have enough to go back and forth. Are we ready to check FF then? I asked, still feeling that it should have been our first destination. Not yet, Gale said. Let's check a few random places. If he's just traveling willy-nilly, then we might find him somewhere near FF. I nodded, seeing the logic, and as we set off, we went to GG first. GG was the place I had stopped after my initial encounter with the oldster, and it was a store set up for Mother's Day shopping. The whole place smelled of flowers, and I really enjoyed coming here. It was nice, and the whole atmosphere seemed to glow a light pink. GG was fine, but as we moved into Heish, we could tell that someone had been there. It was a normal store, except that all the words were reversed. It was like a weird mirror store, and it looked like someone had ripped open a couple of bags of chips and ate them right off the floor. They were scattered like a rat had been at them, and though we weren't absolutely sure that it was him at first, we found more of his leavings down one of the aisles and decided that it was a good enough calling card for our little friend. We checked a few others, and some of them bore similar signs of his visits. Food scattered, trash tossed around, and a nice healthy dump left 9 times out of 10. Now are we ready to check FF? I asked, tired of looking at scat and stepping on chips. I suppose we should, Glenn said after finding his calling card in another store. It seems unlikely we'll just run up on him if he's moving so sporadically. Gale seemed like he didn't really want to go to the hermit's lair, but it was our best bet of finding him at this point. We stepped out of the cave and into the dump, the hermit's store looking as desolate as ever. The floor crackled under our feet as the wrappers and garbage crunched underfoot. He had been just dropping his trash in the same manner that he dropped his waste, and the whole store stank with a mingling of rotten food and human crap. I didn't want to be here either, but we had to go make sure he wasn't hanging out and waiting for company. We stayed close, searching every shadowy nook and dirty cranny, but we couldn't find the old man hiding anywhere. Okay, it was a good idea, but I guess he's out. Come on, let's try somewhere else. We were leaving the back area, near the automotive section, when my foot struck something and I stumbled. I immediately wished I had been looking where I was going, as I fell face first into a pile of filthy rags. My nose came into contact with the worst smells I had ever experienced. Imagine old sweat, unwashed clothes, dirty bathroom aroma, and a hobo camp on a hot day, and you're close. I came staggering up, trying to get away from it as quickly as I could. But when my hands fell on a plastic holder with what felt like paper in it, I reached back and pulled it out too. It was a backpack. One shoulder strap ripped from the bag, and inside was a journal. It was old and cracked, the leather extremely abused by the owner's hands in many openings. The paper inside was curled at the corners, and there was a bookmark inside of a happy car with a fish in its mouth. The handwriting inside was neat, a meticulous script that had been written with care, and I doubted that the crazy old man had done it. There was a lump in the middle of it, and I thought it might be a button or a name tag. But I heard Gale grunt as something came screaming from atop a nearby shelf. The old hermit had returned, and it appeared that we had found something he treasured. Gale turned to catch him, but he landed on him and knocked the wind out of him. The old man was off and capering towards me, his teeth bared and his face a mask of crazed rage. He rushed me like a linebacker, knocking me over as his long, dirty fingers closed around my neck. My air was instantly cut off, his nails digging into the back of my neck as he screamed and gibbered in his weird language. I tried to fight back. I tried to push him off, but he was solid for someone so old. Shoving at him was like shoving a boulder, and he leaned into me as I was slowly strangled. Black spots started appearing in my vision as his greasy finger choked me to the point of unconsciousness. I wondered if the door would bring me back to life when he inevitably collapsed my windpipe. Would Gale be allowed to drag me back through it? Or would this crazed loner simply bite my throat out and eat me right here, when his blood splattered my face? I supposed I'd never get to find out. As his fingers loosened, I could see Gale standing behind him, panting as he released the handle of the weapon. The nails were sticking out of the hermit's skull as he shook and gurgled, and when he slipped to the ground, his blood made dark stains on the blankets that had been his bed. Gale stepped away, shaking as badly as the old man had been, and when he ran for the door, I followed after him. When I came through and dabbed, but he didn't. I knew something was wrong. Now I'm left here with just the journal for company, feeling like maybe we've crossed a line that neither of us were ready for. I'll keep you all posted, but for now, I think I need to go and think about what's happened today. Hey everyone, I hope these are still coming through. My cell phone hasn't needed a charge in a while, and seems to be stuck on 70%. It's a shame. One more and I'd definitely have grounds for some internet points. Hi. It still displays weird times and dates, and no one has answered any of my messages or commented on any of these posts. At least on my end. Gale hasn't come back yet, but it's only been a little bit since the thing with the hermit. No, that's not right. It's only been a little bit since we were forced to kill the old man who resided in FF. I've started reading the journal, but I know now that it isn't his. The journal belongs to someone named C, and I suspect that Gale will be very interested in seeing it when he gets back. I say this because I'm pretty sure that the writer is Colleen. I'll write down a few of the entries and let you judge for yourself. But it sounds like this person has gone farther than even Gail has been. Day 1. This is the first day I've started keeping this journal. I figured out how to take it with me, and I'm experimenting to see if I can take other things with me as well. I had to find the gaudiest one I could find. I'm pretty sure it's got unicorns on it, so that I could visualize it. And that seems to be the secret. I kind of accidentally stumbled across it when I was going through one of the doors with a candy bar in my hand. I could see myself eating it, and when I stepped through, it came too. I was halfway through the Snickers before it hit me that I still had it. Everything else I had tried to take with me was left behind, and I have the feeling this might be the start of something big. Day 2, I visited 12 new Dollar Generals today. It's weird. Some of them have odd things in them, futuristic things that I've never heard of. I found one that sold cigarettes today. Can you imagine a DG that sells tobacco? The tobacco, however, turned out to be these weird vaporizers. It still gave me nicotine, but it was definitely a head rush. I hadn't had a smoke in. God, it's been a while. It was a nice treat. Day 5, I saw a store where everything was upside down today. It made me kind of dizzy. Day 7, I managed to take a backpack with me to a new store today. All the stuff inside disappeared, for some reason. But the backpack came with me, as well as my journal, so that's a start. Day 8, I managed to take things with me to another store today. Normally it helps if you visualize all of them, but it's better if you just see the bag when you take them with you. No clue why, but it seems to work. I'll have to experiment with it some more. I had to go through 7 stores before I got it to travel with me. Some of them are pretty weird, but the one thing missing from them are people. I haven't seen a single soul since I left Gail behind, and I wake up sometimes hoping to see him standing over me. I miss him. I miss the others. I miss the sound of people talking, laughing, just existing. The stores are much too quiet for my liking. When I read that, I had to go back and read it again. Once I read the name Gail, I knew this had to be his lost friend, if she was alive, though. Then how had the old hermit gotten her journal, given the reception we had always gotten from him? It was unlikely that she had been welcomed warmly. Had he killed her? Were her bones part of the garbage that littered the store? I had to read more. Day 10, I saw weird shadows today when I went through the door. They were walking around a weird store, and there were stalls of meat just sitting around. The meat looked very questionable, and when one of the shadows grabbed me, I pulled free and made a run for it. I suspect the bins had human meat in them. Day 11 came upon a dark store lit by lamps. I didn't like it, so I didn't stay long. It made me think of the thing that took Margot and wonder if it lived there. That entry sort of sealed it for me, and I skimmed ahead a little to see if I could find some place new. Day 19 found a weird store with a burnt-out ceiling near the door. The whole place seemed weird, and I don't like anywhere with an exposed ceiling. I moved on quickly, and the next one surprised me. It was underwater. I came out swimming, and though I panicked a little, I didn't drown. I swam around, seeing a few fish. But I saw something big as I got near the back and made my way out. I expected I would have to dry out when I came through, but my clothes and my things were dry when I came out in a Christmas-themed store. Day 20 still in the Christmas store, but I've been thinking about trying to travel backwards. There has to be a way to go back, doesn't there? Gail hasn't caught up. Maybe he never left, and I don't know how long I've been traveling. Days? Weeks? Years? Who knows? It doesn't seem to matter. Time is weird here, and I can't really tell how long I've been here. My wristwatch just blinks 8888 at me, but when I go to another store, it always appears on my arm when I take it off. Maybe I'll experiment a little and see if I can go back the way I came. Day 30 after 10 days of trial and error. I finally did it. I was picturing this store I went to once, the store made of candy and sweets, and when I walked through, I was there. I was so happy that I jumped for joy. Now I just have to make it back to the original store so I can see what happened to Gail. I hope he's still alive. Day 45, no matter how hard I try, I can't seem to go back. I've been trying for days, well, for periods after sleep, and it's no good. The store was kind of unremarkable, and I can't seem to get a good picture of it in my mind. I have to keep trying. I have to keep picturing it. I know I can do it. I know I can make it. I have to go back. I have to find him. There were a lot of entries after that. The writer, Celine, either went forward through the loop or went back to similar DGBs. She was steadfast in her efforts, wanting to see Gail again, but the more she tried, the more discouraged she got. She started writing about how it might be impossible to go back to places you had started at. She began to wonder if there was an end to the stores. Slowly, she lost track of time. The days stopped mattering. The days ran together, and her contemplations began to pile up. She mused a lot, perfected her traveling, and eventually, she was rewarded. Today I did IT. I went back to the first store. I remembered this end cap we had made. Meet the team, where we had posted things about ourselves. It was just pictures and stories and little personal blurbs, but it gave me something to focus on, and I was suddenly standing in the old store. I used to hate when the flash of Margot's instant camera would catch me off guard, but when I saw that board with all our pictures and stories on it, I started crying. We had hoped that someone would find it if anything happened to us, but it looks like I had used it as a way back home. I expected to see Gail sitting there, but he wasn't. I figured he would look up and tell me I had just left and ask why I had come back so soon. Instead, he was gone. I did see his sign, however. And I went to the break room and found his memorial for us. He thinks I'm lost, just like Rudy and Kenneth and Margot. But now I'm looking for him. I have to find him. The stores can't be that numerous. There has to be an end. And if anyone has found it, I'm sure it's Gail. He'll be looking for it, or me, as we speak. And I have to find him so I can team up and help him find the end. I felt myself tear up a little as I read it. She had done it. She had come back to where it all started. If she was looking, though, how had she never found Gail? The stores were numerous, but they had to have crossed paths at some point. I began to wonder how long Gail had been gone, and I worried that he might not come back. Then I would be alone too. I looked back down, flipping through the next few pages as Colleen sat and waited to see if Gail would come back. I knew he hadn't, but it was interesting to see his travels from a different point of view. Celine eventually left too, but she left him a note on his bulletin board so that he would know she was looking for him. That struck me as weird, because Gail had never mentioned seeing signs of her. When he talked about Colleen, it was always in the past tense. He didn't expect to find her, and if he had ever found any sign of her, he had kept it to himself. What else could he have been keeping to himself? I wondered. I flipped through a few more pages before landing on something that seemed interesting. Today I have officially been to every store between the start and the Christmas store, and I haven't found Gail. I have seen sign of Gail, but I haven't found him. I have decided to press on. These stores can't go on forever, and maybe if I find the end, I'll find Gail. It's worth a shot. Today I've been to so many stores I have lost count. Time means nothing anymore. I've started carrying more food. However, when I find it, because not all the stores have actual food, I went to a store on my travels that had nothing but plastic food on the shelves. There was another with rotten food in the packages. Some of them just sell the same item duplicated 1,000 times. Some of them don't sell anything. They're just empty shelves and awful music. There is no end in sight, but I'm not giving up. Today, 30 stores today. Nothing edible today. I was attacked by bats in a large cave. I made it out, but just barely. Today I found a store where the products were made of people, and the people made of food shopped there. I'm not ashamed to say that I ate a few of them when they tried to corner me. I hadn't actually eaten in 3 or 4 stops, and my supplies are all but gone. One of them was made of popcorn. His bled cola. Another was made of celery, and he bled ranch dressing. After I bit and savaged a couple of them, they moved, but I was still hungry. I ate 4.5 of them before fleeing. I've got an arm made of prosciutto in my back, and it's oozing Swiss cheese. Hopefully it will keep me. Today I saw some weird letters on the ground today. They told me I was in XX. I don't know what that means, but the store looked like a little Japanese village, and you could get food there. It was like a theme park, kind of. And there was a bathhouse where I took my first bath in a very long time. I ate and ate and ate until I thought I would burst, and then soaked and slept, and when it was finally time to go again, I was rested and refreshed. Today I saw a dog today. He didn't appear to be in distress, but it was odd to see him. He followed me through the doors for a bit, whining for pets and seeming happy to see me. But eventually when I lay down to sleep, he left and went his own way. Poor thing can only move forward. What a frightening prospect. Today I've gone back to my original store. I'm not sure where I went, but if it's the end, then I don't want to go any further. I stood looking into the bathroom door, something I've done 1,000 times before. But on the other side was something different. The store I was in was a winter wonderland complete with snow, but the other side was pitch black. Things were moving in there. And the longer I looked, the more I realized they were very large but far away. I don't know what that was or what they were, but I couldn't bring myself to walk through that door. I started crying, suddenly just wanting to be home. And when I stepped through, I found myself right back where I started. It should have been demoralizing, it should have completely destroyed me, but it didn't. Probably because I know that I can go back to the door anytime I want to. Probably because I know it will be there when I am ready, and I think that's the worst part of all. I'm going to stay here for a while and consider what to do next. I hope Gale finds me, but I have long ago given up hope of finding him. That was the last entry, and I had no idea how long ago it had been. Behind that page, stuffed between the next two like a bookmark, was a plastic name badge with Salim on it and faded press-on letters. Gale still hasn't returned, and I'm starting to get worried. For that matter, how long had I been sitting here reading it? I wanted him to see this. I want him to know that his friend is still out there. I can't imagine what's keeping him, but I have a bad feeling about it. What if he doesn't come back? What if killing that hermit pushed him over the edge somehow? What if he blames me? I don't know what to do, but as I sit here writing this, I feel my eyes getting heavy. It's been a long, well, not day, but it's been long enough. Hope I still can. Behind the curtain. There was nothing special about that morning. The sun was warm, and the breeze was cool. One of the first hints that spring was here to stay. It started off as a simple thought, just an idea. But I never could have imagined what that idea was capable of causing. I woke up early even though it was my day off. I yawned and glanced out the window, thankful that the snow was finally gone. I debated for a moment what I was going to do with my day, and couldn't really decide. I figured I'd end up doing the same thing I always did on my days off. A morning walk followed by some TV and a few thick gummies. I always wanted to do more in theory, but sometimes the simplest things were the most peaceful. I really loved the walking path near my house. I lived on a street with a dead end, and the path was directly at the end of it. It wasn't anything crazy, just a 4-mile loop around some pretty tame woods. No big inclines or lakes, not much to see. But I still found it really relaxing. I think part of what I loved most was just how plain it was. As a result, not many people went there to walk. I usually never saw anyone at all, which I was a really big fan of. I know I shouldn't mind having to talk to other people, but I hated that awkward moment of deciding whether or not to let out a good morning. I jumped out of bed and got dressed. I was content with the plan for my day off, and I thought about what I would order for food later. I left my house and headed down the quiet street. My decent-sized light blue home was on the left side of the road. As soon as I stepped onto the pavement, I could see all the way down the trail until it curved off to the right. I thought it was really cool to be able to see that far into the quiet forest. I would always stop before the trail bent and look back at my house. There was no particular reason why, I just liked seeing how it looked from that distance. I reached the woods and walked at a calm pace, clearing my head in the process. The actual forest was huge, but the trail only covered a small section. Even moving pretty slowly, I was done in under 2 hours and returned back onto the road feeling content with my walk. I wasn't big on working out, but I like to say any day you walked at least an hour is better than any day you didn't. My body and mind just always felt so much better after. I made it back to my house and turned on the TV. If nothing else, I like to watch interesting things, no dumb sitcoms or reality shows. I love to learn about nature or history, and I looked through my options. Recently, I have been getting into historical evidence of God, like biblical artifacts that could actually exist. I was raised Catholic, but only in name, as we never went to church except for Christmas, and my parents didn't really care what I believed in. When I was younger, I did believe all of it, but the older I got, I began to question things that didn't line up. The more I learned about science and the universe we live in, the more skeptical of many things I became. That being said, there was a lot of evidence of different artifacts and events. It really fascinated me to try and come up with a conclusion that accommodated aspects of the Bible, as well as solid scientific facts. I found a show about the Ark of the Covenant and decided that would be the first thing I watched. I ate one of my edible gummies to really get into a deep mindset as I began the History Channel special. The Ark was one of the religious artifacts that fascinated me most. The stories surrounding it were so important to the Bible, and I tried to piece together fact from fiction. I don't ever mean to be offensive to those who believe every word in the Bible, but it just seems logical that many accounts were exaggerated, as that's the case with any old story. Truthfully too, some stories are just plain hard to believe. I don't buy a lot of it, but there are things like the existence of Jesus and the Great Flood that actually do have a lot of historical evidence. One way or another, it all just intrigued me, and I loved spending my free time thinking about it. The special was about an hour long, and I was hooked the whole time. When it was over, I put on a comedy show for a few minutes so I could think deeply before I watched something else that challenged my brain. I thought about the Ark and the power it was supposed to have, as well as where it could possibly be if it actually did or still does exist. I thought too about Jesus and all the miracles he performed. The truth is, there has to be something there. Not all the stories are fake. There are just too many accounts of Jesus and the large impact he had. I mean, even the fact we're in the year 2024 is because of him. So what's the conclusion of it all? That was the real question to me, and fueled by the edible, I thought about it longer than normal. We as humans live on Earth, and more than likely evolved into the state we're currently in. But are there other planets life can survive on? It certainly seems incredibly likely with the size of the whole universe. I wonder as well if there are humans on other planets, or if we only look the way we do specifically because of the Earth. So why are we here? Why does any life exist? What's the point of living for what on the grand scale of things equates to an insignificant amount of time? If God is real, why would he create us just to die? I thought about it in silence for a few minutes before something occurred to me. There is likely other life out there, no matter what form it actually takes. I've heard more than once that if a civilization gets to a certain level of advancement, they could create a simulation that's so realistic you couldn't distinguish it from real life. Like the Matrix, basically. And if we were in one, we would never know. Maybe, though, it's not even as complicated as that. Maybe other life just decided to make us because they could. I know humans have a sense of arrogance that our existence has to have some special meaning. But what really supports that besides what we hope for ourselves? We're no different really than any other creature on Earth in the long run. And we certainly experiment on other animals. If we had the capability of creating life from scratch, we definitely would. So what if we were created by another species out in the universe? What would that actually mean? I'm not cynical about life, but like I said, I don't believe we're special or God's chosen people or anything like that. But it makes total sense that's what we would want to believe. No one wants to think about the bleakness of life and the fact that maybe we're only here on Earth because we can be. If aliens, for lack of a better word, did create us, do they check in on us, keep an eye on their creation? Or did they just make us leave for whatever reason? There's a real debate about human nature, whether we're inherently good or bad. I've often struggled trying to decide which I believe. I want to think we're good, but anytime I do, someone starts a pointless war, or you hear about a mass shooting. But anytime I accept that we may be bad, I see a community come together after a disaster, and it makes me second-guess myself. I think the real answer isn't that black and white. I think humans are both good and bad when it really comes down to it. But would that have been what the goal was? If we were created in that way, were we supposed to be fully good and kind, but the more we learned and developed, we became bad? Or maybe something went wrong with whatever mixture was used to make us. One way or another, we are flawed. That isn't up for debate. The question really comes down to, if there weren't laws in government, would we all just kill each other? Actually, wait, laws aren't what keep people from doing that. It helps, but it's not the main driving factor. Religion is. The fear that if you lie, cheat, steal, or kill, you will burn in hell for all eternity. That's what really stops most people from being bad, whether or not many realize it. We strive to be good because we think God is watching everything we do. And maybe that's the whole point. What if we were created by aliens? I'm not picturing flying saucers, but more like larger-than-life entities. Maybe they made us and placed us on Earth hoping for us to be an extension of themselves and believed we could thrive here in harmony. But what if somewhere along the way something went wrong, and we didn't come out totally good? The Bible is full of stories like Adam and Eve about humans being flawed and making mistakes. Even Noah's Ark is about how the whole world basically became evil besides him and his family. Maybe these stories came from the aliens themselves. It would actually make total sense. What if they saw we had gone bad and needed a way to get us back on track, so they created religion? They came up with God, heaven, and hell in order to give us a reason to be kind to each other. They spoke to select humans under the guise of being God, to make people believe there was a reason to be good. Maybe the Ark of the Covenant was a radioactive weapon that appeared to the people of the time to be creating miracles to reinforce all of this. What if Jesus was one of these aliens and he came down as a kind of last-ditch effort to get us back on track? It would be the same idea with other religions too. I just don't know enough specifics about the rest. In essence, what if our real creators came up with the idea of religion as a kind of cover story in order to protect the effort they spent to make us? They orchestrated events, created important objects, and influenced people. Basically, anything they would have had to in order to ensure we believed in the existence of a watchful God, when in reality they were the ones doing the watching. Does that mean then that they've since given up on us? God no longer speaks to people, and it doesn't seem like Jesus is actually returning anytime soon. Wars and violence raced through my mind as I thought about how we never truly learn from our mistakes. Countries hate each other for dumb reasons and people kill one another over material things like money. We really are flawed beings, but maybe it's gone too far. Maybe the truth is we weren't always inherently bad, but somewhere along the history of Earth we did become truly evil. And our creators have had enough. What if they're just waiting and watching, trying to pick the right time to end humanity as a whole? If that all is the case, I don't think they would be all right with any of us knowing the truth. I had to sit up in my chair as I realized just how much I had spaced out. I decided to put a pin in it, because for once my conclusion actually seemed plausible, and it made me feel kind of bleak. I normally never got that feeling, but I felt almost abandoned in a way. It was just so odd too, because normally when I thought about this type of stuff I could move on quickly after. But this really stuck with me. I couldn't help but feel like I had discovered what's really behind religion. Not just some crazy idea in my bones. I knew I was right. It didn't feel good though. I felt strange and like I had a spotlight over my head. I climbed out of my chair and walked around for a few minutes until I felt a bit more at ease. I decided that I was going to watch something funny for a while longer and take a break from all the meta-religious stuff. I focused on the show I was watching, cracking a smile a few times. I felt way calmer and even chuckled to myself about freaking out over something so silly. The edible was probably just hitting me harder than I expected. I assumed in a few hours I would realize just how dumb I was being. I got off the streaming service I was using and decided to see what cable had to offer. I turned through the channels looking for something entertaining to watch. Preferably something dumb and fun. I was done with all the deep thinking for one day. I stopped for a moment on the movie Matilda and remembered watching it as a child. I laughed to myself and kept it on the channel for a few minutes as I reminisced about enjoying it with my cousins many years ago. Just as I had lost myself some in the movie, I heard my phone ring. I almost jumped since I wasn't expecting a call, but I checked to see who it was. To my surprise, it was my friend Matilda. Wow, that's a really weird coincidence, I thought. What are the odds that she would call right when I was watching a movie with the same name? In fact, I hadn't even talked to her in a long time, so it was especially weird. I picked up the phone, marveling at the odds of her calling. Hello. It was quiet for a moment. Oh hey, sorry, I didn't mean to call, I accidentally sat on my phone, haha. We laughed for a second and both hung up shortly after. I didn't really want to talk to her anyway, but it took me a moment to return to the movie as it really was such an odd coincidence. I wanted to laugh about it, but truthfully, I just felt really off. It seemed like something that would never actually happen. I had plenty of coincidences in my life, but it just felt so specific. I changed the channel as I no longer wanted to watch the movie. After a few more minutes, I decided I was going to go for a drive and try and shake off the edible some. I really wasn't feeling the vibe. I hopped in my car and turned some music on and began a slow drive around town. I didn't plan on driving for long, but I just needed a minute out of the house. I turned through the radio stations and stopped on one because they were talking about Rice Construction. Rice was a company that my friend's dad owned. I hadn't talked to either of them in a long time, just like Matilda. I still wanted to listen to the ad for a moment. It sounded like they were doing well, which made me happy as both of them were super nice people. I approached a stoplight and brought my attention back to the real world, as there was a red truck a bit closer to me than I would have wanted. I stopped somewhat abruptly, but not anything insane. After my car came to a halt, the truck caught my attention, and I began to feel very strange again. On the back of the truck there was a rectangular-shaped logo. It was gray with a single word in white on the inside. I rubbed my eyes as I mouthed the word out loud to myself, Rice. It was one of the trucks that belonged to the construction company. It wouldn't have been that weird except for the fact that last I heard they only had 3 of these trucks. More importantly, the company was based over 2 hours away, and I had never seen one of their trucks here. The light turned green, and it took me a moment to react. I was shocked I saw a Rice construction truck right after listening to an ad for it. I had never heard an ad for it before, and I had only ever seen one of the trucks when I was at its base location with my friend. They didn't even operate here as far as I knew, and I hadn't talked to my friend in a long time. But to be fair, by a long time I mean around 3 or 4 months. I don't think a ton would have changed in that time frame, but maybe I'm wrong. Either way, I figured it was a good idea to head home. I was clearly a bit too high, and I wasn't exactly being careful driving. I felt so odd and distracted as I drove home. I pulled into the driveway and just sat there for a few minutes. I was having a really bizarre day and more than ready to not feel so high. I wished I hadn't had such deep thoughts about who my creators could be. I didn't think it was actually a big deal, but anyone who's been really high knows you can get very paranoid sometimes. The coincidences were making me feel way weirder than they should have been. In my dumb state of mind, I connected them to my inner dialogue from earlier about God. I stood up to get out of my car when I heard a faint humming sound. For a second I couldn't tell what it was until I looked to my right and saw that my neighbor was mowing his lawn. It wasn't just him though. There was a lot more to the sound. I glanced across the street and my other neighbor was mowing his lawn too, and so were his neighbors to the right and left. I slowly realized every single house on the street was. All heads down, every single lawn I could see had someone out mowing. Men, women, and children just focused on what they were doing and not realizing how weird it was that everyone besides me was doing it. I stepped inside my house trying to ignore the dull buzzing sound that resembled a hive of slow-moving bees. I sat down on my couch and turned the TV back on. I wondered if something was really going on, or if I was just being paranoid. It was weird one way or another, the Matilda thing and the rice truck. The mowing was so strange too. I tried to pretend like it wasn't, but a lot of these people usually hired someone to do their yard work. I didn't get why they were all suddenly mowing at the exact same time. Plus, none of them acknowledged it. No one had stopped and pointed out how funny it was. I sat there trying to shake everything aside, but I just couldn't. I felt on edge, like I was being watched or I had done something wrong. I just didn't feel normal. It was easy to blame the edible, but I had been high plenty of times. Truthfully, I knew that it wasn't having much of an effect on how I felt. It wasn't like my first time taking it or anything. I knew what to expect, even in a situation where you took too much, and this just wasn't it. I watched TV for a while, trying to find the most lighthearted things I could, to forget how I felt. I began to dread another coincidence happening. I thought I was stupid for worrying about it, but I still did anyway. I was more on edge than I could ever remember being. I decided I was going to take another walk, as that was the place I felt most at peace. I knew if I was ever going to clear my head, it would be out in the woods. I got up and pushed the front door open slowly. I looked around and saw everyone was still mowing. I walked down my driveway and was about to step onto the road when a car I had never seen before slowly cruised by. I waited a moment for it to pass, and as it did, I glanced at the license plate. I did a double take when I realized there was something a bit off about the plate. I wanted to ignore it, but this one really got me. There were no letters on the plate, only numbers. Those numbers were 671996. Maybe I was just paranoid, but it still seemed so out of the ordinary. My birthday is June 7th, 1996, all the same numbers as the plate. I walked down the street as the car literally just reached the dead end and turned around. I waved to the man driving as he passed me, but he just stared back. I felt truly strange, like I was being followed or something. Not from any person though, all sides felt like there were eyes on me. I approached the woods and shuffled onto the trail. Every time I glanced at a house too, someone always seemed to duck behind the blinds right as my eyes caught them. Thankfully, I reached my house and slammed the front door, locking it before slowly backing away. I felt a bit better being back in my own home, but I still didn't feel safe. For the rest of the afternoon, I just watched TV and tried not to really think about anything at all. No matter what I did, I still felt watched. It's hard to explain the feeling, but the closest thing would be if you were a human exhibit at a zoo. Having that feeling inside a house is a truly strange sensation. To make things even weirder, the same movie was on 5 different channels and the same show was on 4. It really could have just been another coincidence, but again, like the others, it just felt fundamentally wrong and almost dangerous in a way. I just couldn't shake the feeling that all of this was meant to threaten me. Like a warning that I made a mistake and was about to pay for it. I shut off the TV around 7 and decided to read for a few hours and then try and get some sleep. A book felt safer than anything else, and I just wanted nothing more than to distract myself and shut my brain off for a few hours. The more I tried not to think about our creators, the more I found myself going back to them. Like it was too late for all of this to go away, and now I was stuck on this path. I opened up my favorite book that I had read at least 6 times, and I tried to lose myself in the words. After about an hour of reading, I finally began to feel a bit at peace. And that is until I saw it. It was by far the strangest and most terror-inducing event yet. On page 67, which just like the license plate is the first 2 numerals of my birthday, June 7th, the main character's name began to be replaced with mine. It also happened to be right around when he was in a dangerous situation, which wasn't lost on me at all. I frantically flipped through the pages and the rest of the book was the same. Cade instead of James on every single page. I even went back to the pages I had already read, and they were now replaced with my name. I turned back briefly to page 67 with tears in my eyes and fear overcoming every inch of my body. I wanted to see if anything else was different. I looked through every line until the very last one caught my eye. I knew pretty much everything the book said, and the last line stuck out to me immediately. There was a new sentence added. It simply said, "What do you believe in, Cade?" I slammed the book shut and threw it across the room. I rubbed my eyes and tried to pretend this was all from the edible, but I knew it wasn't. I debated calling one of my friends or my brother, but I had this weird sense that I couldn't trust anyone. I decided before 9 to just go to bed and try and forget everything at work tomorrow. I laid down in bed and thankfully passed out pretty quickly. I woke up early and got dressed for work. I left my house at 7 and soaked in the beautiful morning on my way to the office. I felt much better for a moment, like all of it was just a bad dream. I pulled into the parking lot of my office and sighed to myself, hoping work would at least be normal. As I glanced up at the building, though, I about had a heart attack. There were 8 floors in my building with desks beside every window. Every one of the people at those desks was standing in front of the many windows, staring at me. I started to shake uncontrollably and didn't dare go inside. I slowly backed out and began to drive home. I tried to calm down on my drive, but I didn't even know what to do with myself. I felt like I should call my boss and tell him I was sick, but I was scared to even do that. I had a lot of sick leave, and I decided I was going to take a few days to try and calm myself down. My heart sank. I felt like I was being taunted and warned at the same time. I was now fully convinced I was right about the creators, and they were going to make me disappear. Throughout the rest of that day, I had at least 5 more coincidences. They ranged from things on TV to vapor trails from planes that looked identical. I could have sworn too for a moment the world outside of my house flashed in front of me like a staticky television. To my horror, behind the flashing world, I saw what appeared to be a huge figure standing in front of total darkness. The figure was also clearly staring right at me. After that, I really panicked. I decided I had to talk to someone, and I took the risk of calling my brother and telling him I needed him to come over. To my relief, he sounded normal on the phone, and even pretty concerned, which did make me feel a bit better. I waited impatiently for him to show up, which he did very quickly. He pulled into the driveway, and I watched him walk up to the front door to see if there was anything that seemed weird. I opened the door for him, probably looking like a ghost. "Hey man, are you all right?" "Yeah, dude, just come inside. There's something I need to talk about." He nodded, and I sat down on the couch. "So, what's up?" He sat across from me in my armchair, and I felt a bit more at ease talking to him. We had always been very close, so I was fine with opening up to him about things. I just didn't know how he was going to take all this. So yesterday I was watching this thing on TV, and I stopped myself as I made eye contact with him. My blood ran cold when I noticed it. My brother had brown eyes, but now he suddenly had green ones. Everything felt different when I noticed. It was like he was a stranger in a human costume. He seemed to realize I had caught on, and his whole act dropped. He smiled and simply said the words I now dreaded more than anything. "What do you believe in, Cade?" I froze and began to get angry. "What do you want from me?" He was still smiling. "I want to know what you believe in." I thought for a moment and felt a primal fear, like he may attack me at any moment. I don't know. Why do you want to know so bad?" "Yes, you do know. We know that you know." He stood up, and I jumped back to defend myself. He chuckled to himself, still with that awful smile. It was my brother's face, but he had never smiled like that before. "We know that you know, Cade." With that, he walked to the front door and shut it softly behind him. I stumbled over to the window and watched him get in my brother's car and begin to drive off. I hadn't noticed before, but his license plate was the same as the other cars, the numbers of my birthday. He waved to me sarcastically and pulled out of my driveway. Just then, as I was looking out the window, what I knew as my reality seemed to flicker once again like a television with a bad connection. There were now 3 large figures in front of the black abyss that I could clearly see for almost 5 seconds before the world filled itself back in. A week has passed, and I never went back to work. I never called my boss or my family, and I haven't left the house. I'm almost out of food, but I don't even feel hungry. I haven't slept at all, but I don't feel tired. All I really feel is watched, my every move followed both by the eyes of my neighbors when I look out the front window, and by an invisible set that I can always sense. I want to hide and escape, but no matter what I do or where in the house I go, I can't get away. I've never felt so alone in my entire life. I can't trust my friends, neighbors, family, or coworkers. Even the squirrels and birds in the yard seem to watch me. Maybe that part is just paranoia, but it's not like it matters either way. When I turn on the TV, every channel is playing that documentary that started all of this. That now infamous History Channel special about the Ark of the Covenant. TBS, FX, TNT. It doesn't matter, it just plays all day. I tried to call this Finity people just to see what they said, and of course, the response was, "What do you believe in, Cade?" I tried to read again, but all my books said my name instead of the main characters, just like the first one. I now just sit and stare out the window, waiting for who or whatever is going to show up and take me away. The world flashes more now. It's up to about once an hour, and those 3 figures in the dark abyss seem to be getting closer to me. I can't make out much detail on their faces besides large purple eyes. I can tell they're at least 50 feet tall, if not bigger, and seem to have a faint glow coming off their yellow skin. I don't know where they came from or what they're going to do to me, but I do know in my heart that I'm going to find out soon. It's just a matter of time. They never take their eyes off me. Another few days have passed, and I've given up on any notion that I can escape from this. There's no hope, and I'm ready for it to end. Neighbors walk right up to my front door and just stare at it for hours. I opened it once and asked what they wanted, and you could guess what he replied. I just watch them stand there staring at nothing. I don't even consider opening it anymore. The flashes of reality are now every 20 minutes, and it's clear that one of the figures is reaching its arm out in my direction. It took me a while to see it, but the hand is over the house across from mine, casting a bright light in the darkness every time there's a reality flicker. It's reaching out to me, and I know no matter where I go, it'll get me. I'm writing this in case anyone ever finds this notebook, so they know what happened to me. I've made the hard decision that it's time to give up. I don't know if I'm on Earth still and people in my life have been replaced, or if I've been taken to a world that looks like mine but is something else entirely. I don't think anyone will see this, but it makes me feel a bit better either way, just to get my thoughts and experience out. I think these beings exist in the 4th dimension, and they're able to directly affect anything they want. I'm positive too that my conclusions are in fact what caused this. I think a lot about how dumb I was for spending so much time trying to figure this out. But on some weird level, I'm glad I know the truth. It's like a strange sense of freedom I can't really understand. I'm confident these beings are our creators, and they don't want to risk me telling anyone else what I know. Either way, I'm done trying to figure out every little detail of what's happening. I'm just going to see for myself when they take me. I'm going to head into the woods and just wait. I have this feeling that if I stay out there for a few hours, I'm going to just vanish. I'm not even scared anymore. Just curious. I'm going to bring this notebook with me and record everything until the last minute. In a moment, I'm going to leave my house for the last time. And no matter what, I'm really going to miss the life I had. I walked out slowly into the street, and all the neighbors turned to stare at me. The world flickered on all sides, and I felt as though the road was floating in outer space as I kept my eyes trained on the entrance to the woods. My reality held together long enough for me to make it into the forest, and I turned back to look at my house one last time. All the neighbors were now in their front yards and in unison put their arms up to wave at me. I was done fighting it, and just waved back. I sauntered out deep into the woods and found a spot with a large opening between the trees. I sat down on a big rock and soaked in the beautiful weather one last time. I turned to look up at the opening in the sky, and reality flashed over and over. I see the hand reaching through the treetops only about 30 feet away now. I don't think I have very long left. My brother Cade was always a very level-headed guy. We were close growing up, and I still can't believe he's been missing for 2 months. The police search has been officially called off. There was just no evidence at all besides this. I was the one who found the notebook in the woods near his house. I know he loved to walk there, and we scoured the area over and over. I still just can't make any sense of it. He never showed any signs of being crazy. Seriously, none at all. But what he said here suggests he was deeply troubled in a way I can't understand. I talked to the neighbors a couple of days ago, and they said they were never all mowing at once like he described. None of them stared at him. None of them noticed him at all. I never came and met with him either. In fact, he hadn't answered any of my calls for over a week before he disappeared. I just miss him and want to find him so he can get the help he needs. He talked about religion a lot before, but this was something else. It just sounds like it made him snap in some unsettling way. What he said about religion is actually logical to me and makes a lot of sense. But everything after he makes that conclusion sounds insane, and it makes me sad knowing how much it caused my brother to lose touch with reality. I have no idea where he could have gone, and the thought of him all alone makes me deeply sad. It is a bit odd though, when I was on the phone with my friend yesterday, he asked me what I believed in. Considering what my brother wrote, it felt weird. It's obviously not related in any way. Coincidences are just random chance. I have to find Cade so I can tell him that myself. I'm going to keep searching these woods for however long it takes to find my brother. I want him to know he's safe, and we all just want to help. I'm worried those gummies he was taking contain more than just Theek. I know in my heart he has to be somewhere in this forest. I don't care what the police say. It may take me days or even weeks, but I will find my brother. I have a feeling I'm getting close. The farther out I go, the more I get the feeling he's watching me. Supernatural Vigilante Association. The Voodoo Priestess. I proceeded to the rendezvous on foot, having asked my taxi driver to drop me off a couple of blocks away. This was not the wisest decision in retrospect, but I wanted to keep a low profile and avoid the attention of both the cops and the gangs who lurked on the streets. I carried a taser and pepper spray in my jacket pockets, but doubted these defensive weapons would provide much protection if it came to the worst. A cold and constant rain fell on my head as I proceeded down the dark and seemingly abandoned road. Many of the streetlights had been vandalized, and the city authorities were understandably reluctant to conduct repairs in this part of town. Therefore, the street I walked was largely shrouded in darkness, but this suited me fine as I wanted to remain hidden in the shadows. Nevertheless, I surveyed my surroundings carefully as I proceeded slowly toward my destination. The road was quiet. I didn't see any other pedestrians on the sidewalk or cars on the street. But this didn't mean I was alone out there. I listened out intently, only to hear the heavy patter of rain hitting asphalt and the distant barking of dogs echoing of concrete buildings. There was little in the way of commercial premises in this neighborhood. The few businesses that had once operated were mostly burnt out during the riots. their charred husks still standing as a lasting monument to anarchy and violence that had engulfed this sprawling metropolis only weeks before. I shook my head in disgust, looking up into the dark, starless sky as the raindrops fell on my face. It wasn't meant to end up like this. Sure, this once great city had long been plagued by violent crime, but there was still hope not so long ago. Many believed the tide was turning, that the unlikely coalition of vigilantes could deliver ultimate justice upon the human monsters who stalked the streets. But their mission had backfired badly, and now the crime fighters were wanted criminals themselves, fugitives from the law and on the run from the cops. But what had gone wrong? This was the question that interested me. There was a story to be told, and I wanted this scoop more than anything. This was why I was willing to take a considerable personal risk to attend tonight's meeting. I had a long history with the so-called Supernatural Vigilante Association, having been the first journalist to reveal their existence all those years ago. So, when I received the phone call from my source, I couldn't resist the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I continued to ponder these matters as I proceeded along the empty sidewalk, but I shouldn't have let my thoughts wander, because I didn't notice the approaching vehicle until it was too late. The squad car rounded the corner and glided slowly down the street towards me. Its siren wasn't blaring and blue lights were off, so I guessed this was just a routine patrol. Nevertheless, I was concerned as the police car crept alongside me until the vehicle was directly adjacent to the pavement. I slowly and nervously turned my head in time to see the single uniformed officer in the driver's seat, a gray-haired veteran with hard eyes who glared toward me suspiciously. I was frozen on the pavement, not knowing what I should do next. I did briefly consider running, but this would only make me look guilty and surely prompt a pursuit. Technically speaking, I wasn't breaking any laws, but I also didn't have any good reason for being in this part of the city so late at night. The cop might use his powers to stop, search, and question me. I could even be detained. The charges wouldn't stick, but I would miss my meeting, and surely my source wouldn't give me a second chance. And so I was understandably nervous at that moment, as everything would depend upon the police officer's next actions. I stood still as he brought his squad car to a halt and shined a torch in my face. I squinted as the light hit my eyes, temporarily blinding me. "What are you doing out here, kid?" asked the cop, his voice gruff and unfriendly. I thought for a moment before stuttering my response. "Good evening, officer. It's a hell of a night, isn't it?" I shouted, struggling to be heard over the constant rainfall. "I think I got turned around somewhere. Can you tell me where the nearest subway station is?" The cop lowered his torch but continued to glare at me with suspicion. I felt certain he didn't buy my weak cover story. The question was whether he cared enough to intervene. A lengthy pause ensued before the cop's radio burst to life and he received a call from dispatch. I didn't catch the details through the static and rain, but the policeman's expression suddenly changed as his attention was drawn away from me. He offered me quick-fire advice before departing, saying the subway's 5 blocks in that direction. I'd get there quickly if I were you. This is not a safe neighborhood after dark. With that, he put his foot down on the accelerator and sped off into the night, the squad car's sirens blaring as he rushed to respond to the call. I breathed a deep sigh of relief as I watched him go. I was soaked through to the skin, but nothing could dampen my spirits as I took my final strides towards the meeting place. The Rendezvous was a seedy hotel located on a back street and away from prying eyes. The establishment's name was the Sanctuary Inn, and it was one of the few remaining businesses in this neighborhood, although the small and run-down hotel was anything but legitimate. I felt a twinge of doubt when I looked upon the glaring neon sign hanging above the reinforced steel door. I had a pretty good idea of what happened inside this joint. To the best of my knowledge, its main customers were junkies shooting up and prostitutes entertaining their johns. It seemed ironic that former crime fighters would end up taking refuge in a den of sin such as this. But desperate times make for strange bedfellows. Under normal circumstances, I would never enter such an establishment. But this was where the story had brought me, and I had to follow the lead. I swallowed my fear as I approached the fortified and uninviting front entrance, pressing the intercom button with a shaking finger as I nervously looked up at the security camera. There was a short pause followed by a burst of static and a deep voice that called out from the other side. "Who the fuck are you?" He swore. I was somewhat taken aback, but answered nonetheless, lowering my head so I could speak directly into the intercom. My name's Carter. I'm here to see Mandrick. He's expecting me. Another pause followed, and for a moment I feared I'd made a mistake. But after a few seconds I heard a satisfying buzzing sound as the door's lock was opened. Pushing through, I shook off the rain as well as I could before entering the dimly lit and grimy hotel lobby. My nostrils were soon hit by the stench of mold, damp and bodily odors which I didn't want to think about. I proceeded across the suspiciously sticky floor towards the front desk, which I noted was surrounded by a security cage. I ignored the sign on the far wall listing the hourly rate for rooms and prices for miscellaneous services, instead looking to the unpleasant man who sat behind the desk, his long hair greasy and his eyes filled with malice and lust. His crusty lips curled into a crude smile as he looked me up and down with contempt. I noted how his right hand was under the desk and reckoned he was probably reaching for a gun. A television was blaring in the background, but the weasel-faced man was focused upon me, for the time being at least. "So, you're the journo?" he asked dismissively. "You don't look like much to me. Not built for this world, are you, kid? Sure you don't want to run home to your mama?" He laughed cruelly in open mockery. I was pissed off but kept my cool, not rising to the bait as I replied through clenched teeth. The foul receptionist scoffed as he looked away from me and back at the TV set. "Mandrick's in room 13 on the second floor. The elevator's bust, so you'll have to take the stairs." With that said, he was done with me. I elected not to thank the man as I proceeded to the staircase under the dim lights. Walking up the stairs and along the narrow corridor on the second floor, I ignored the shouts and moans coming from the other rooms as I reached number 13 and knocked firmly on the door. "Come in. It's open," was the reply. I froze for a second since I recognized the voice all too well, even though I'd never met the man face to face. I experienced a cold chill in the second before I grasped hold of the door handle, twisted it, and proceeded inside of the small and squalid hotel room. The man inside looked totally out of place in this vile establishment, and yet here he was. Mandrick sat up from the mattress, shooting me a charming smile as he offered his hand in friendship. I noted the immaculate three-piece suit he wore, and the wide grin on his lips which showed off his pearly white teeth. Mandrick exerted the same charisma and confidence in real life as he had done in the many online videos he'd recorded and uploaded over the years, as he performed his role as the public face of the spa. I took his hand and shook it, noting his tight grip as he pulled me in closer. In another life, Mandrick might have been a businessman or media personality, but there was another side to him which I knew all too well, as I'd spent years studying the man and reporting upon the many killings he'd ordered and coordinated. But even if I hadn't known Mandrick's history, there was something in his eyes that would have given him away. There was a darkness in those eyes, the killer's look that he couldn't fully hide, even beneath all his charm and smiles. I tried to stop myself from trembling as I reluctantly met Mandrick's gaze, but I wasn't fooling anybody, least of all my host. He knew I was afraid of him, and yet I'd come to meet this man in a place of his choosing. I experienced sickness in the pit of my stomach upon realizing a simple fact, that Mandrick could kill me right here in this seedy hotel room, perhaps to take revenge for all the negative articles I'd published over the years that had damaged the SVA's reputation. I had to trust that he was genuine about wanting to tell his story, and I was his means of doing so. "Mr. Carter," he said amicably whilst maintaining a tight hold of my hand, "what a pleasure to meet you at long last. Please grab a seat and take off your wet coat. May I offer you a drink?" "No, thank you," I answered nervously before taking the chair closest to the bedroom door. Mandrick nodded knowingly as he sat back down on the mattress facing me. "I apologize about the venue. Regrettably, this is what we've been reduced to as we try to keep one step ahead of the authorities. I'm sure you met Eddie at the front desk?" "Yes," I replied hesitantly. "He is certainly a colorful character." "Mr. Carter," he said amicably whilst maintaining a tight hold of my hand, "what a pleasure to meet you at long last. Please grab a seat and take off your wet coat. May I offer you a drink?" "No, thank you," I answered nervously before taking the chair closest to the bedroom door. Mandrick nodded knowingly as he sat back down on the mattress facing me. "I apologize about the venue. Regrettably, this is what we've been reduced to as we try to keep one step ahead of the authorities. I'm sure you met Eddie at the front desk." Yes, I replied hesitantly. He is certainly a colorful character. He's scum, Mandrick answered through clenched teeth. Vermin. A pimp and a dealer, the type of which we would have gladly dispatched in years past. But Eddie knows which side his bread is buttered, and we can count on his cooperation and discretion during our brief stay. I looked him in the eye uncertainly before replying. That's good. Now, Mr. Mandrick, as you know, I've taken a considerable risk in coming here today. But I'm eager to hear your side of the story. I'd practiced those words repeatedly in preparation for this meeting, and I tried to exert confidence in my voice, even though I was frightened by the perilous situation. You told me over the phone that you've got someone for me to meet, I continued. A former SVA member who wants to give their side of events. Mandrick nodded his head and smiled faintly before replying. You are indeed eager, Mr. Carter, always keen to pursue the story. I admire this about you, even though your reporting has often damaged our organization's standing. He cast me a hard glare which made my blood turn to ice. But don't worry, my friend, Mandrick continued. This is all water under the bridge. I do indeed have someone important for you to meet tonight. In fact, she's waiting in the next room. He nodded towards the inner doorway which connected rooms 13 and 14. But first I want to speak with you one-to-one, Mr. Carter, to provide you with a brief history of our organization so you can better understand where we came from and how we got here. I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. I knew what was coming, a propaganda speech from the representative of a designated terrorist group. I'd heard this many times before, but felt like I needed to humor Mandrick to keep his good faith. We have all witnessed the failure of our justice system, he began. We know the endless victims who have been let down, while perpetrators walk free or are handed out pathetic sentences. I and a few others decided enough was enough. We identified a number of special individuals with powers beyond conventional understanding. Many of these candidates had been victims themselves, but they lacked the capability and resources to retaliate against those who'd wronged them. That's where the plan for the Supernatural Vigilante Association came in. Our plan was to utilize the powers of these extraordinary individuals to target the right people, the truly evil motherfuckers who deserve to be put down. But you need to understand, Mr. Carter, we didn't go into this blind. We knew the risks of taking the law into our own hands. Who polices the police, right? Our intention was, I interjected at this point. It wasn't wise to interrupt Mandrick in mid-flow, but I lost my temper upon hearing this all too familiar justification. With respect, Mr. Mandrick, none of this is new information. I have reported extensively on the origins and formation of the SVA. The public knows all too well how this started and how it ended. What they want to know is what went wrong and how you arrived at this dark place. I regretted the words as soon as I'd spoken them. I saw the anger in Mandrick's eyes, the resentment and rage which boiled just below the surface. He glared at me with murder in his eyes, and I felt my body stiffen. I started to reach for the taser in my inside pocket, but didn't think it would do me much good. I felt certain that violence would ensue, but thankfully Mandrick pulled himself back from the brink, exhaling deeply before the smile returned to his lips, and he answered calmly. Of course, you are quite correct, Mr. Carter. Our time is limited and we must press on. If today's interview goes well, I hope to arrange further meetings so you can speak with more of my comrades. These brave men and women have stories that need to be heard. Now, let me introduce you to the Voodoo Priestess, one of our very first SVA activists. Mandrick raised his volume as he shouted through the connecting door. Tabitha, can you please come in here? A tense pause ensued before the door swung open and an astonishing woman entered. I sat forward in dismay as I watched the beautiful, dark-skinned woman dressed in a traditional and colorful dashiki walk into the room. Her brown eyes glistened as she looked down upon me, her powerful gaze drawing me in. But my instincts told me not to stare into those eyes for too long, lest I get sucked in by her dark power. I noted the Ankara bag she carried over her shoulder and dreaded to think what was contained within. And I felt a strange mixture of fear and frustration in that moment, struggling to stand as I took Tabitha's hand, experiencing a surge of energy as our palms touched. It is a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Carter. I have read all of your articles. Your work is illuminating, if not always accurate. I stared into her deep brown eyes and my knees felt weak. like I was a nervous teenager talking to a pretty girl for the first time. Well, I muttered nervously, that's why I'm here. To get your perspective. Tabitha smiled sweetly, although I noticed a menacing glint in her eye which made me feel uncomfortable. Nevertheless, I took my seat whilst Tabitha sat on the hard mattress opposite me. I'll leave you both to it, said Mandrake as he made for the door. He turned his head briefly before exiting, looking to his female comrade before saying, "Shout if you need me, Tabitha." His comment struck me as odd. I was certainly no threat to Tabitha. Quite the opposite, in fact. But a moment later he left the room and shut the door behind him, leaving the two of us to speak in private. Once Mandrake was gone, Tabitha looked me straight in the eye, and once again I felt myself slipping into a dark abyss. That was until I forced myself to look away. "I want you to know something," she said firmly. "I'm not just another freak of nature who inherited a supernatural power beyond their understanding. My power was taught, passed down through multiple generations through the female line. Ours is an ancient tradition, a religion charting its origins back to Africa, through Haiti, and finally here to the city shrouded in darkness." She sighed deeply and lowered her head before continuing in a softer tone. "But I'm not here to provide a history of my people or of voodooism. We did not start as vigilantes, although the priestesses who joined the spa had their reasons. They call us witches, they think we're devil worshippers. Everyone knows what happened, about what we've done. But I need you to understand why. That's what I want to know," I answered nervously, still not daring to look the woman in the eye. She exhaled deeply before speaking again. "For me, it began with my parents. My mother was a powerful priestess, capable of great things. But she had a fatal weakness, her husband, my father. He was a brute who beat her constantly. Father was a large man and he could hit hard, but mother had the power to bring him to heel. She could have ended him with a mere click of her fingers, but she wouldn't. She loved him, you see. Mother kept telling herself that he'd change, that the latest beating would be the last. She kept believing that lie until he put her in the grave." Tabitha looked up, a fiery defiance entering her voice as she delivered her next line. "I could do nothing as a child. But as my powers grew, I vowed I would never let this happen again. So, that's how it started for you," I asked curiously, "to seek justice for your mother." "In a sense," she confirmed. "I wanted to stop abusers from getting away with their hideous crimes, to make them feel the pain and suffering they inflicted upon others. But before I unleashed justice upon the unrighteous, I needed a test run. As it happened, there was a suitable candidate in my own apartment building, not even half a mile from where we now sit." I raised an eyebrow, chilled by where this account was going, but also intrigued. I thought back on all the spa-related murders I'd reported on, but couldn't recall one linked to Tabitha. I sat back in silence whilst patiently waiting for her to continue. They were my neighbors who lived on the same floor. The woman was called Tracy and the man was Kyle. They kept themselves to themselves at first and seemed like a nice and happy couple to the untrained eye. But I'd grown up in an abusive household and knew the signs to look for. I noticed how Tracy wore extra clothes to cover up her bruises, how she always seemed nervous when I saw them together in the elevator, and I recognized the look in his eyes, the unjustified hatred and barely concealed rage. I knew a killer when I saw one and realized it would only be a matter of time before he ended his girlfriend's life. She paused, swallowing deeply in an attempt to control her emotions. The police would do nothing. There were no witnesses and no real evidence. I knew I'd need to take it into my own hands. Now, you've seen all the depictions of voodoo in the movies, pricking pins into dolls and all that bullshit. We don't do that, but there are methods, dark magic we can use to punish our enemies. It took me a while to make the necessary preparations and to gather the material I needed for the ritual. I won't betray the secrets of my craft. You understand that I still owe loyalty to the spiritual movement which trained me. Suffice it to say, I obtained personal items relating to my target. A strand of hair, a treasured heirloom. I have my means and I'm patient. When all was in place, I conducted the ritual and evoked a dark spirit to set upon my target. Now, I didn't set out to kill Kyle. I wasn't ready to use such extreme measures at that time. Perhaps I was weak. I don't know. She hesitated again as sadness became evident in her dark brown eyes. I felt obligated to reach forward and touch her hand, shooting Tabitha a sympathetic smile as I prompted her to go on. "What happened?" I asked. I thought I could weaken him. She said softly, my plan was to break his spirit, to make him sick and weak so he couldn't hurt her anymore. But it didn't work, I asked, whilst withdrawing my hand and looking her straight in the eye. Oh, the spell worked fine, Tabitha replied defensively. I know for a fact that he was bedridden and in agony. Tracy told me as much when I saw her. She sighed aloud. I guess I should have seen it coming. It's the same pattern playing over again with my mother, with Tracy. Kyle getting sick didn't set her free. It bound her to him. I thought she'd use the opportunity to escape from the abusive relationship. But I guess Kyle had her firmly under his control, because Tracy stayed by his side and wanted to nurse her abuser through his illness. Jesus, I swore in shock. Yeah, tell me about it, she replied. What did you do then? I pressed. Tabitha shook her head, and I could tell she was trying to hold back the tears. The sickness spell wore off, and of course he started hurting her again. I knew there was only one way to end the cycle. She explained emotionally. I realized that I had to kill him. It was within my power to do so, but I hesitated. Perhaps murder comes naturally to some, but not to me. All was ready on that night, and I truly believe I would have gone through with it. I was prepared to speak the words and summon the darkest of spirits from the underworld, but I waited too long. We were briefly distracted by a noise from the next room. I swore I heard Mandrick's voice, and he sounded agitated. This was worrying, but I chose to ignore the potential danger because I needed to hear the conclusion of Tabitha's story. Just before midnight, I heard raised voices and crashing sounds coming from Tracy's apartment. Tabitha explained I knew what this meant, and so I leaped up onto my feet, running out into the corridor and banging on their front door. I heard Tracy's screams from inside the apartment and knew there was no time. So I used my bag of tricks to force open the door before I burst inside. But it was already too late. Tracy was on the floor in a pool of her own blood, a dozen stab wounds punctuating her torso, as she slowly choked to death, and the life force drained from her frightened and pained eyes. And Kyle stood over her, a manic look in his eyes and the bloody knife in his hand. He glared at me with a murderous glint and snarled through curled lips. He called me a bitch and claimed I'd turned his girlfriend against him. Kyle was going to make me pay. With that, he charged towards me with the knife in hand. I cried out and tried to flee, but Kyle was on me in a second, knocking me to the ground and pinning me down. The monster was on top of me, his eyes bulging and spittle flying from his mouth as he tried to bring the blade down and plunge it into my chest. I expended all of my physical strength to prevent him from doing so, but my mind was in another place. I spoke the words and used my true power, evoking the darkest of spirits from the other side to claim his wicked soul. Kyle suddenly stopped his attack, dropping the knife and climbing off me, his eyes now filled with unadulterated fear, as his face turned a ghostly pale. I spotted it before he did, the dark shadow which appeared as if from nowhere, taking the shape of a man as it glided across the apartment floor. Kyle turned around slowly, screaming in sheer terror as he saw the demon approach. I'd never seen one of these dark spirits in action before, and I must admit it was horrifying. What monster had I brought into this world? I wondered at that moment, but there was nothing I could do to stop it. I remained frozen on the floor, watching on in terrified awe as the demon consumed the screaming Kyle in its dark form, crushing him and sucking his soul from his physical body. The deal was done, and Kyle was dragged to hell, leaving his lifeless corpse to collapse to the ground. My God, I exclaimed upon hearing the end of Tabitha's tragic tale. I heard nothing about this killing. It wasn't claimed as an SFA operation, was it? No, Tabitha said with a faint smile. She looked towards the connecting door, and I noticed how Mandrick's voice had increased in volume as it seemed he was shouting down the phone in the next room. Back then, Mandrick had connections with the local police. Tabitha explained. They covered up the crime, writing it off as a murder-suicide. No one ever knew the truth of Kyle's death until now. Mr. Mandrick said I did the right thing. He told me I was a special talent, and they needed me as a full-time SFA operative. But I couldn't. I'm not a killer, and I can't live with the guilt, so I've decided to come clean, no matter what the consequences. She looked up at me with tear-filled eyes, perhaps hoping for empathy or absolution. My jaw dropped and I found myself speechless. I hadn't expected this. I'd always considered the SVA as ruthless kill eliminated their targets without remorse or afterthought, but Tabitha didn't fit the bill. She genuinely regretted her actions. But why had Mandrick introduced me to her on this night? Was he deliberately trying to show a more sympathetic side of his violent vigilante organization? I wanted to ask these questions and many more, but there was no time. As a moment later, Mandrick burst through the connecting door and shouted a frantic warning. "We need to leave right fucking now," Mandrick exclaimed, his eyes full of intensity and his face red. "What the hell, Mandrick?" Tabitha replied. "They've found us," Mandrick confirmed. Tabitha's eyes widened in shock as she struggled to reply. "Who has? The cops?" "No," Mandrick answered firmly. "It's that son of a bitch Hennessy. The PI. He wants the bounty on my head all for himself. That rat bastard Eddie sold us out." We heard the heavy thumping of boots in the corridor outside, and I knew the threat was real. "You can deal with this," Mandrick said while speaking directly to Tabitha. I noted how he pointed to her encore bag whilst doing so. "You can summon the dark spirit and send Hennessy straight to hell," the vigilante exclaimed. "No," Tabitha replied firmly and without hesitation. "I won't do it." "Not again." Mandrick appeared angry for a moment, glaring at Tabitha as if to challenge her defiance. But the voodoo priestess was not backing down. "Oh well," Mandrick said in a more conciliatory tone. "I guess it's time for less subtle methods." Next, he got down on his knees and retrieved a weapon previously hidden under the bed, which I instantly recognized as a pump-action shotgun. He worked the gun and loaded a shell into the chamber before turning to us both and giving a firm order. "We're going out. Stay behind me." We both obeyed as Mandrick opened the bedroom door, and the three of us tumbled out into the corridor. I glanced into the darkness and saw two men charging towards us, their faces illuminated by the dim strip lights. The first man I recognized was Eddie, the greasy hotel receptionist turned traitor. Eddie's eyes widened in shock as he realized his betrayal had been discovered, and he scampered backward to take shelter. Meanwhile, the second man dropped down to one knee and aimed a pistol in our direction. I saw he was dressed in a dark trench coat and had a deep scar across his cheek, but I could see little else in the dark other than the gun. I assumed this newcomer was Hennessy, a bounty hunter in pursuit of Mandrick and his people. "Give it up, Mandrick," Hennessy shouted in a gruff voice. "That's all over for you." "The hell it is," Mandrick replied defiantly, and then he opened fire with his shotgun. The buckshot tore down the corridor, winging Hennessy but failing to take him down. A moment later, the bounty hunter returned fire with his pistol, his bullets missing us by mere inches and slamming into the wall behind us. "Go," Mandrick screamed over his shoulder. "Get to the fire escape. I'll meet you on the street." His frantic orders were directed towards Tabitha and me, and we didn't hesitate, dashing down the corridor side by side whilst more bullets whizzed over our heads. I can barely remember our escape down the back staircase as I remained in a state of acute panic throughout the mad dash. I don't know how we made it out, but miraculously Tabitha and I reached the relative safety of the rubbish-strewn alley behind the hotel. I noted how the rain had now stopped and thanked God for small mercies, but we weren't out of the woods yet. I could still hear gunshots and frantic shouting from inside the building, and also the sound of distant sirens on the city streets, as surely the cops had been alerted by the gunfire. I looked at Tabitha in a blind panic, only to find her surprisingly calm. "We need to go," I shouted frantically. "Just wait," Tabitha responded whilst looking back towards the fire escape. "Mandrick will make it out. He always does." I shook my head in disbelief and prepared to flee as the police sirens grew louder. But Tabitha was right, as a moment later Mandrick sprinted down the staircase. He appeared frazzled and the still smoking shotgun remained in his hands, but the vigilante leader was still very much alive. "The fuckers will get me one day, but not today," he proclaimed defiantly with a smile on his lips. "My story does not end here." No doubt he wanted the valiant quote to appear in my article, and I must admit that he struck an impressive pose in that back alley, an anti-hero fighting back against the odds. But Mandrick wasn't stupid, and he wouldn't wait around for the cops to arrest him. He promptly grabbed a hold of Tabitha's hand before shouting in her ear, "Come on, priestess. Our carriage awaits." The unlikely couple made to flee, but before he ran, Mandrick cried over his shoulder towards me, saying, "Mr. Carter, I trust you can make your own way home. Keep your phone on, please. I'll be in touch." I watched the pair flee down the darkened alleyway, noting how Tabitha shot a look of sadness and regret before she was led into the shadows. I was frozen in disbelief for a brief moment, but the ever-increasing din of sirens brought me back to life, and so I took off in the opposite direction and disappeared into the night. My editor was very happy with the story I delivered, but less so with the risks I'd taken to land it. Nevertheless, my exclusive hit the front page and promised to be the biggest scoop of my career. But the story didn't end there. A week later, I got word that Tabitha had walked into a police station to hand herself in, making a full confession for her part in Kyle's violent death. I guess she couldn't live with the guilt any longer. There is a lot of interest in the case and some debate over whether the voodoo priestess will ever stand trial. To the best of my knowledge, there are no laws against summoning a dark spirit as a means of self-defense. In another development, the body of Eddie, the Hotel Sanctuary's sleazy proprietor, was found abandoned in an alleyway, his flesh being gnawed at by rats and other vermin. Eddie's hands were tightly bound behind him, and he'd been shot twice in the back of his head, execution style. There were no witnesses and no forensic evidence, but it was obvious to me who was responsible. Surely Mandrick had taken revenge on Eddie, punishing the hotelier for his betrayal. This murder would send a powerful message to anyone who was tempted to sell him out. And now Mandrick is the most wanted man in the city. The entire municipal police force is on his tail, not to mention Hennessy and a dozen other heavily armed bounty hunters. The price on the vigilante's head has now doubled, rising to a cool $2 million. But at the time of writing, my most prized source is still at large, and he's not done with me yet. Just yesterday, I received a call from an unknown number, and I instantly recognized the charismatic voice on the other end. "Mr. Carter," Mandrick said enthusiastically, "I did enjoy reading your latest article. I think perhaps you're beginning to see things from our perspective. It's a shame about Tabitha. The woman had so much potential, but she lacked the stomach for our line of work. Still, like I told you that night in the alleyway, my story isn't over. And neither is yours." "What do you mean?" I said, feeling apprehensive but also intrigued. "I have more special people for you to meet." Mandrick said coyly, "More extraordinary stories for you to hear. I'll be in contact when I can arrange a secure place to meet. I know the risks involved. I almost died the last time around, and I have no doubt that Mandrick is dangerous and highly manipulative. And yet, I can't walk away from this story. The vigilante has me on the hook and he knows it. But Mandrick's narrative isn't necessarily the reality, and I must do my due diligence as a professional. I shall uncover the dark truth of the Sva, no matter what the cost."